Looks like we're live. So just before I call the meeting to order today, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge that many in our community feel impacted and moved by the Black Lives Matter demonstrations that have been happening around the world and across our country. I was also moved when participating in the local rally that was organized by a grassroots group here in Canmore. And I sensed an underlying and genuine intent to do better, both as a community and as a society. The tragic events that continue to occur so regularly remind us that no community can say that they are not complicit. While I'm proud of the actions that the town has taken to ensure a respectful workplace and to respond to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations, I know that we can't stop here. I want to acknowledge that the town of Canmore stands with all of those who are committed to fighting against systemic racism here and elsewhere, and to finding justice for our Indigenous people and all people of color. And with that, I will call the meeting to order and look to the agenda for approval. Is there changes? There's one addition, as I understand, item D2, a verbal update on stage 2 reopening.
Yes, that's correct, Mayor Borman.
Is there anything else in the way of changes to the agenda?
None from administration.
I'll move the agenda be approved as amended. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. We have 4 delegations today, and I'll just remind all of the delegates that there's 10 minutes to present to council, and then of course there'll be time for Q&A allowed after that. So we'll start right off the bat with the Bow Valley Victim Services Association.
Yeah, hi.
Molly Q.
Yes, it's my daughter's.
Doesn't sound like Molly Q. Does.
Exactly. It's my new name. Like it's my new Zoom name. Yeah, and it could be my daughter's name as well when she changes it for her calls.
All right. Well, good to see you again, Peter. It's been a while.
Yeah, thanks very much for letting me join you for this afternoon. And I always appreciate the opportunity to join council, and you've been a great supporter of our program for the last 24 years. So it's nice to have the chance to thank you in person, but it's also nice to be able to let you know how your money's being spent. So I've spoken many times over the years to council, and I'd sort of told you a lot of the nuts and bolts of what we do, the who, what, why, where, and I wasn't going to do that so much in the 10 minutes today. I was thinking maybe more just talking a little bit of some of our achievements over the past year and sort of letting you know of some of the trends we've been facing. If there's some of you are less familiar and you did have questions, please at the end, if I could fill you in, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. But one thing is it is more of a nuts and bolts type part of what we do is we're doing a study at the moment, because we've done it for, I guess this is our 27th year now we've been doing it. So we wanted to make sure we're doing it right. So we've been doing a study with people we assist, trying to find out what's helpful for them and what help are they looking from us. So we haven't finished the report yet, but clearly the thing that people are telling us is when they go through a traumatic event or they're victimized by crime, the number one thing they want is somebody to talk to. So that's coming out loud and clear, and hopefully that's what we've been offering people. And I think that sort of, if people want somebody to talk to, it really means that they want us to shut up and listen. And then if we listen, then we can maybe start to find options for them of how we can help them. If we can listen to what help we might be, whether it's emotional support or practical assistance or information. So that's kind of one of the things we've been discovering with the study, and hopefully it feels like we're on the right track, because it feels like that's what we've been doing with people. As for numbers, because we are in our 27th year, we've helped over 15,000 people now. That sort of relates to over 7,000 calls we've been involved in. We do education programs every year, so now we've done education programs for over 25,000 people now that have attended. We've gone to court with over 2,000 people, so that's a lot of what we do. Last year we helped about 250 people in Canmore, and that was in a couple of hundred calls. It's pretty similar. The last few years, last 2 or 3 years, the numbers of calls we've been involved with have been fairly consistent, and the trends have been fairly similar. Probably the biggest thing we deal with, especially in Canmore, is domestic violence. So that's the number one thing where we assist people. So out of those 200 calls, probably close to half of that is domestic violence related. So every week we assist. There's a couple of new situations we become involved with where we help people. And a couple of years ago, we looked at how much time we spend doing that, and probably that new case or that new person we're assisting, that's probably going to be involved. It'll probably involve about 20 different contacts over a period of time, whether it's with them or other agencies like the police or courts that we're dealing with. So that's kind of where a lot of our time in Canmore is spent. Again, not a huge change over the last year or two, but when we looked at it over a 10-year period, that's doubled in 10 years. And for us, our staffing really hasn't changed in 10 years. We have 3 people now at 2.8 positions and a 0.4 position. But 10 years ago, we had 2 full-time positions, which is the same amount of hours worked. So that's certainly one of the trends we're looking at. To provide the service that people want from us, we probably need to have at least another half-time person. So that's kind of one of the trends we're looking at in the upcoming year. We're actually going to be doing it earlier in our year begins in April, so we're going to be doing it earlier in the year. But as many of you are aware, that the world's changed a lot in the last 3 months. So as for us, how we've changed, since March, we don't meet people face to face anymore. And I think people are fine with that. I think they'd be uncomfortable if we were providing face to face assistance, to be honest. So we do support over the phone is the main way we provide support until we feel like people want face to face and we feel we can do it safely. And our main office is at the Banff RCMP, and we still have a person there every day in the office, but we've just gone to having one person in the office because our space in the attachment is fairly small. So we still have one person there, but just one of us there at a time, and the rest of us working from home. The last 2 trends I wanted to share with you is probably maybe some of the other people on the call might be experiencing as well, is sort of for us, the last couple of years we've noticed there was a decrease in donations to our program. Not a lot, but it was a bit of a decrease. And then that's certainly one thing we've noticed, and we anticipate noticing in the upcoming financial year. We probably will see a significant decrease in donations. There's a lot of people that have done fundraisers for many years for us and have provided support. So I think a lot of those events and donations won't be happening simply because people won't be in the position to be able to provide that financial support and assistance. And we appreciate that completely. So that's certainly one thing we're aware of will influence this in the upcoming year. And the other thing is, maybe over the last 10 years, we've looked at sort of the help the provincial government was giving us, and we really felt like that wasn't enough. So our budget in the last decade's gone up 30%, but we've only really asked for a small increase from the towns. We've really only asked for the town for like a 3,000 increase over that 10-year period. And the reason behind that is we've been trying to get our increase in funding from the provincial government. So we've been successful getting more funds from the provincial government through that, but we get a lot of our funds from the Victims of Crime Act, and the Justice Minister is looking to change that. There's actually an act before the before the legislature at the moment, making amendments to that act. And I had the chance to talk to him about 6 weeks, 8 weeks ago about it. And that might finish up resulting in a decrease in funding for us as well. So that's one of those things, again, it's hard to know. But they're sort of a few of the trends that we've kind of experienced. I don't want to take up too much of, I know there's a lot of people on the call, so that was kind of the updates I wanted to share with you, and this maybe give you a chance to ask any questions about our program that you might have, whether it's operational or questions about the past year.
Great, and thanks very much for that presentation. So outside of the provincial and municipal governments, there are no other funders, is that correct?
Yeah, that's we certainly have we use the support of corporate funders as well. Lafarge has been wonderful over the years. They've been, a lot of our funders have been with us 20 years. So Lafarge has been with us over 20 years providing funds. There's organizations that sort of do fundraisers for us or provide us with annual funding. It's a smaller part of our budget, but all those smaller grants certainly add up. There's a concierge association that provides funding to us. There's Crossways has been great over the last few years. So people that would normally fund us, I'm sure they're not going to be able to do it in the upcoming year because of their situations changing. And
you just indicated that your funding from the provincial government, you expect that to be reduced in next year?
It's hard to say. We get the way they fund it. It's fine surcharges on provincial statutes. So it's at the moment, if you get a speeding ticket, you make a 15% donation to the Victims of Crime Fund, and that's going to go up to 20%. But the minister's plan is to fund policing and Crown prosecutors, which would normally be justice funding. They would just we need police and we need Crown prosecutors, and that would normally just be funded out of general revenue, out of the budget, Justice Department budget. But he's going to use part of the fund to do that, so he's changing legislation to make it possible. So we did indicate there'd be maybe $1 million less going out in grants in the upcoming year. So
they would reduce the amount of money that flows to victim services from tickets and whatnot. They would reduce that and direct it to basically general operating.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard. There's some pushback in the press about it, so it's hard to know if.
I would think so.
It's hard to know what their plans sometimes change.
Well, that's really disappointing to hear, to be honest.
Yeah.
I had one question about your report itself, and you clearly noted that the work you're doing is increased dramatically over the last 10 years. Just in the report, it shows that overall there was a decrease in the last year, and right across the various communities. I'm really curious. Not much of a decrease, but I wonder why that would be seen right across, Banff, Canmore, Lake Louise, Kananaskis. Yeah, I'm not sure about Kananaskis and Lake Louise. Sometimes it's just new members coming in and out of those communities. They have a turnover, so sometimes it could just be familiarity with our program. For Kananaskis, Lake Louise, for Banff, Canmore, I think it was only a couple of % difference. And our year actually finishes April 15th, so it might have just been the beginning of COVID had sort of seen decreases as less people came to Canmore and Banff. Yeah, that would make sense if that includes the beginning of COVID. Yeah. Do any councillors have questions for Mr. Quinn? Councillor Seeley?
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Thank you, Mr. Quinn, for the presentation. Under statistics, I was curious of the category sudden death. And it looks like Canmore and Lake Louise have had a bit of a spike there, and Banff has reversed that trend. What is that area?
The sudden deaths, it's really, it's multiple. It could be somebody dying elsewhere, and we sort of provide support to the family that lives in the area. It could be someone visiting the area. It could be a accidental death in the backcountry. It could be kind of a wide variety of deaths. I think Lake Louise has gone up the last few years just because the visitation's gone higher. If there's more people coming into Lake Louise, there's probably going to be more people having misfortune when they come into the backcountry, so, or heart attacks when they're visiting Peyto Lake. So for Canmore, it's really, if I had to guess, I would say it's probably more visitation, more people coming to the community. If I had to think, sort of 5 years ago, there was probably less people visiting Canmore than there is now, and probably in 5 years' time, I would anticipate more people coming, and then more people here, more things seem to happen in the community.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there questions, Councillor Mara?
Thank you for your report. I just wanted a little clarification, Mr. Quinn, on stats. The numbers include people from outside of these communities, correct? That have come in and the incident has happened in our area?
No, it certainly includes people in that as well. So like in Banff, I would say probably 30% of people we assist are people visiting Banff. Probably Canmore, I would guess about 10%, just off the top of my head, 10 or 15% would be people visiting the area. So they're included. So it's not all residents.
Thank you. And thank you for your work you do.
Oh, thank you.
Councillor McCallum?
Thank you, Mayor Barman, and thank you, Mr. Quinn, for your presentation. I was wondering if you could tell me the funds that Bow Valley Victim Services receives from the Victims of Crime Fund. What percentage of that budget, of your budget, does that entail?
It's about 50%. We used to get about 40%, which was one of the lowest out of the province, and there was no real justification or reason for that. So we've sort of really been lobbying to increase it to at least 50%. So we certainly have it up, and our goal was to try to increase it. So it works out about 130,000. So they could, under legislation, give us 150, and we would fit the criteria to receive that, we would argue, but where they haven't been giving us. So it's kind of, we're pushing to get more funds from them, and they're actually
Giving us less.
indicated they're going to be withdrawing. Yeah, they're going to be withdrawing less.
And so have you had an opportunity to speak to our local MLA and present to her personally with regards to this disappointment?
No, just the only time I got a chance to meet a MLA was at Mayor Borman's brunch a year ago. When she was just elected, so I happened to sit next to her. So we talked a little bit at the time. But so I haven't gone in to speak to her directly about it. But that's why I was pleased that I went with a couple of colleagues. We were going to meet with the Justice Minister, and then we couldn't because of meetings. So we had a Zoom meeting with him, but it was nice to be able to speak to him directly about sort of the work we do and the value of the work we do, and hopefully influence his decision going forward that he's clearly going to be funding other people, but please make sure when you fund other parts of the Justice Department, you don't forget about the needs of victims of crime. So,
right.
So
well, that's the whole intent of that premium on our tickets, is to be able to assist victims of crime. And so it sort of brings into question the reason to charge it in the first place if it's not going to where it needs to go, where it's needed most. Do you know, is Bow Valley Victim Services, is it common for other communities our size, like our collective size, I guess, to have an organization like yourself to help?
Yeah, they're spread across. Alberta probably has one of the best systems of services to victims of crime and trauma in Canada, and certainly sort of it's worldwide. It's really well respected. Pretty much every part of the province has programs very similar, well managed, well staffed, and providing a service. A lot of people look at this model as being a good go-to model, and a lot of it's volunteer based as well, which gives us 24/7 coverage. So we have sort of several of our volunteers at PhDs, so it's not, they're smart, intelligent, capable people that come and volunteer and give us their time. So so we're lucky to have that support, so we can offer service 24/7, so people get the help when they need.
Thanks. And I would encourage you to contact our local MLA if you have the opportunity, either personally or by email. But I do thank you for the work that your organization does. It is a deeply needed service in our community. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
If there's no further questions, I'll add my thanks, Mr. Quinn. The success of Bow Valley Victim Services is, I would say, largely thanks to your participation. You've been
Yeah.
leading that for a long time and doing great service for our community.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for those kind words, and thanks for everyone for your time.
Okay, we'll see you again.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
So at this time, we'll now hear from the delegation from the Biosphere Institute. And who we got coming up? Ms. Hajnowski.
Oh, yeah.
Hi.
So I'm joined today as well by Nick DeReuter, the WildSmart Program Director.
Okay.
And
Is Nick going on camera? Oh, there he is. Hi, Nick.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, you have a 10-minute window for the presentation, and then we'll have Q&A after that, of course. 15 minutes. Anyways, get going. You got time.
okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So the goal for us for this presentation is to help council get an idea of what the town of Canmore's contribution has supported at the Biosphere Institute over the last year and a half, and also to give you a little bit of a look forward to our priorities for the rest of this year and moving into 2021. And it's not advancing. Hang on. Okay, so I am just going to focus on the main programs at the Biosphere Institute for this presentation, which are WildSmart, Bow Valley Shift, which is our climate change and environmental sustainability program, and our youth education programs for grades K through 12. And I'll be giving you the highlights due to time constraints, so please know that the town's investment has supported more than what I'm just going to speak about here in this presentation. I also want to say a couple words about how our programs form part of a strategic vision that is guiding the Biosphere Institute's activities, and give you a couple of quick updates on operations and fundraising. And hopefully at the end of this presentation, you'll all be feeling as happy as all of these folks at Settlement Services after their presentation and wildlife safety training with Nick last year. So I'll start with WildSmart. So WildSmart continues to expand its reach locally in the Bow Valley and regionally. The program reached over 20,000 in-person contacts in 2019 for the first time. And these contacts come through a variety of different programs, including wildlife safety workshops that teach folks how to avoid and handle wildlife encounters, bear spray trainings, children's education programs, and thousands of contacts through the Wildlife Ambassador Program, which is a volunteer program with about 30 volunteers who receive in-depth training annually on public engagement and wildlife ecology, and help to educate the public on trails and at community events about their role in human-wildlife coexistence. And as you can imagine, these all of these programs, they reach really diverse audiences, from kids to new Canadians, seasonal workers, permanent workers in the Bow Valley, and more. And in addition to these in-person contacts, WildSmart is reaching tens of thousands of more people via social media, TV, radio, newspaper. These numbers up here represent 2019 statistics, but obviously these numbers have continued to increase into 2020. And WildSmart is also extending its reach internationally and really reaching out to new demographics. So for example, from April through July of 2019, we hosted an Italian master's student at the Biosphere Institute, Francesco Del Greco. Francesco is actually using WildSmart as a model for developing brown bear education and community engagement programs in Northern Italy. So he's actually has introduced members of his community in Trento now to Nick DeReuter, who is really excited about the WildSmart international exchange. That's a joke that may be coming from this. Yeah, Nick has his fingers crossed that he's going to be going to Northern Italy soon. Earlier this year as well, WildSmart translated its popular Nature for Newcomers brochure into 6 additional languages for 10 languages total. We've also subtitled a very popular video about how to properly use bear spray now into 10 foreign languages. So we're really working to reach new audiences and make it easy and accessible for them to access information about coexisting with wildlife. And then I'll just close, I'll close the WildSmart portion of this presentation by talking about some exciting new directions that we are developing related to the wildlife ambassadors in particular, and social science, particularly related to better understanding human behavior. So earlier this year, we started working on developing a vision for the Wildlife Ambassador Program. The Ambassador Program has been going since 2007, and a number of the volunteers have been with the program since the beginning and have contributed hundreds of hours to engaging the public on our landscape. We're developing a vision with a long-term goal of creating a culture in the Bow Valley where all of our community members are able to be ambassadors for wildlife. That's what we would ultimately like to see if we think into the future. And as a result, we want to start working to add more layers to the ambassador program, to bring in new ambassadors from key community groups, and to provide additional options for participation. And so we're taking some first steps toward this vision now. For example, right now, we are holding a series of workshops with our existing wildlife ambassadors. These are being held online. And the goal is to design 3 potential new initiatives for the Wildlife Ambassador Program. This work is being done hand in hand with the ambassadors, honoring their expertise and insights that they have gained through years of experience with public engagement, and going through the full process of conservation design together. So starting with understanding what they think the needs are for coexistence, how we might design new projects to address them, what the objectives and activities and desired results of those projects might be. So this is really exciting, and this will continue to evolve over the summer and fall. We'll also be starting a new project later this summer where we'll be trying to recruit wildlife ambassadors from key community groups who are important for promoting human-wildlife coexistence solutions. So those might be trail user groups, folks from hospitality associations or hotel staff. And the goal is to work together with them to develop tailored messages that they believe will best resonate with their peers and group members, and then to evaluate whether or not those tailored messages are working. And finally, we're developing a new project around recommendation 22 of the Human Wildlife Coexistence Technical Working Groups report. This is a project where we're beginning to work with trail user groups and other community groups to understand how trail users are thinking about wildlife, how they're prioritizing wildlife, and what might be the challenges for navigating solutions that balance the needs of wildlife with recreation on our landscape. This is a very new effort, and we're building a collaboration with University of Alberta as well. So we hope that this will be the first step in a longer term project. And I'll move on to Bow Valley.
Sorry, Cheryl, can I just interrupt before you move on? Because I have a couple of questions specific to the previous slides, the WildSmart.
Yeah.
And maybe while Nick's there, it's a good opportunity. And I think I've raised these questions at the board meetings as well. So with the plan for the growing in the Wildlife Ambassadors Program, is there an opportunity then to have more interaction with the wildlife ambassadors up in places like Quarry Lake, off-leash dog area where we have quite a bit of conflict?
I'm going to let Nick answer that question, or at least start, and then I can add potentially.
Yes, certainly. We normally get them to go where they're most needed and most required. And that area that you just described certainly is a confusing area for a lot of people. So wherever they're needed, they're going to be able to go, whether it be Town of Canmore lands, Alberta Park, provincial lands. So certainly they can go to all those places. And we're hoping to have them out on the trails and ready to go by early July with all the recent changes on June 12th from the government.
Mm-hmm. That'll be great, because there certainly seems to be confusion up there, or uncertainty about what the rules are, or why we even have rules. And in the same vein, the tailored messaging that you were talking about, and working with specific groups to tailor messages to those groups. Again, I think as a group, dog owners might be a good group to work with to get some tailored messaging going around how to move with dogs in the corridors, in habitat patches.
Agreed. I think that would be a very good user group to be able to collaborate with, for sure.
Super. Thanks very much.
Yeah, and I would add as well, the co-design project with the wildlife ambassadors is also about listening to what they see as needs on the landscape too. So it's about bringing them in as participants in the process of designing conservation and coexistence initiatives, which I think is really exciting for our community members.
Super, thanks.
Okay. I'll move on to Bow Valley Shift. So as everyone knows, the Shift program has had a major initiative related to community renewable energy generation over the last year or so. I spoke about that in April to council, and I'll just, so I won't go into detail on that project here. I will just add that in May, this project received support from the Federal Investment Readiness Program, which was a very competitive application process. Less than 10% of applicants received funding. And this grant will support Bow Valley Green Energy becoming fully ready to accept community investment, and also doing a detailed study of 3 potential project sites to get them ready to shovel ready stage. And for the Shift program, it will be a major priority to continue to support Bow Valley Green Energy, and particularly its success on community engagement and education around community renewable energy generation. So look for us to continue to be working on those efforts in the future. A major project, an additional major project that we worked on in 2019 and early 2020 was an energy efficiency education initiative. The goal of this project was to broach more challenging topics around energy efficiency in our buildings in Canmore, which emit 57% of Canmore's greenhouse gas emissions. So it's really important for us as a community to understand how we do deep energy retrofits and renewables and financing and more. And this project was unique because it wasn't just about delivering education materials, it was about learning from our residents. And so it was a participatory learning process. The first few months, we actually engaged almost 400 residents and 36 representatives of local business, particularly builders and developers, commercial property owners and contractors. And we asked them, what are you doing right now on energy efficiency? What are the barriers to doing more? What topics do you want to learn about? And what formats do you want to learn in? And then we sought to deliver education programs that were directly responsive to the needs that they expressed. And we hosted a series of residential workshops in February and March. We were planning, in collaboration with BODA, a sustainable building summit and trade show in April, which is now being modified due to COVID-19 concerns. The final piece of this project, which is really neat, is that it's actually, we're working with University of Alberta to assess the impact of the education programs that we deliver on audiences' levels of knowledge and on their intended behaviors. So it's relatively rare for education programs to assess impact beyond the numbers of attendees, and we should have the results of this relatively soon. So that's really neat. And then finally, the town of Canmore continues to help to support the Shift newsletter, which was formerly the Sustainable Action Canmore newsletter that provides practical tips to residents about how to reduce their carbon footprint and lead more sustainable lifestyles. That newsletter is currently going out to over 1,100 households in the Bow Valley, the vast majority of which are in Canmore. And then finally, our youth education programs. We underwent a significant strategic planning process for our youth education programs. This is grades K through 12 at the beginning of 2019. We consulted with 14 informal and formal educators here in the Bow Valley about what the needs are for wildlife and climate change education in particular, and how we can help to meet those needs. And there are really 3 pillars that are guiding our work going forward that came out of the strategic planning process. The first is development of lesson plans for grades K through 9 that are directly aligned with science and social studies outcomes in the Alberta curriculum to make it as easy as possible for teachers to get wildlife and climate change education programming into their classroom. The second pillar is about blending Indigenous perspectives into our programs, and the third is about fostering leadership at the high school level. And I'll speak very quickly about what we've done on each of these 3 pillars over the last year or so. For grades K through 9, we've recently published 24 entirely new wildlife and climate change lesson plans on our website. These lesson plans build off of each other from grade to grade. And they include learning objectives, background stories. They include video interviews with local experts to help teachers bring an expert into their classroom, and guides even to community action projects that teachers and students can undertake together. We have delivered our wildlife and climate change education programs in 2019 to over 2,600 students in 13 schools in Canmore, Banff, Morley, Exshaw, and even Bragg Creek, which has represented a very significant increase in our reach, more than double the number of children's programs and youth reached from 2018 to 2019. So very exciting work there. In terms of blending Stoney Nakoda perspectives into our work, we hosted a bear sharing day last June that brought together grade 5 students, as well as teachers and parents from Lawrence Grassy Middle School and Exshaw School. We had 7 Indigenous knowledge keepers who helped to guide the day, and we shared stories about people's relationships to bears, to nature, and to each other. Students from Exshaw School actually prepared to be the experts for this day, and they manned 6 stations about grizzly bear ecology and black bear ecology and cultural significance, and they taught the students from Lawrence Grassy Middle School at those stations. Earlier this year, the Biosphere Institute reached an agreement with the Nakota Youth Council to continue to collaborate on blending Indigenous perspectives. This work has been slowed somewhat due to COVID-19, but we are hoping to facilitate ongoing cross-cultural sharing days. We had initially planned a water sharing day for this June to talk about the significance of water and climate change in our mountain ecosystems. And we're also hoping to work with the Nakota Youth Council to develop formats for bringing elders and knowledge keepers into the classrooms in Canmore. And so we do hope to pick up this work more in the fall. And then finally, at the high school level, we are laying the groundwork, we hope, for a youth environmental leaders network that will connect students and conservation professionals here in Canmore with the goal of carrying out meaningful projects related to wildlife and climate change. And so I just want to say briefly, all of these programs and activities are really for the biosphere. They're part of building a vision for collaborative conservation and conservation that happens with our community. So by this, we mean conservation that is guided not just by science, but also by local knowledge and community participation in order to find lasting solutions. And for us, this also means doing conservation in a way that brings people together rather than dividing people. And so I'll just talk briefly, very briefly about—
Cheryl, excuse me,
yeah.
sorry, you're over 15 minutes now.
Yeah.
Talk quickly and we'll hear you the end.
Okay. So I guess I just wanted to show kind of how we're building the blocks toward this vision. So our education programs are really the foundation. And the idea that if we want to work together with our community to find solutions to challenges related to human-wildlife coexistence and climate change, we need to be informed. We need to be all looking at the same facts. And we can build off of this foundation of education and begin consultation and co-learning from our community in the way that the Biosphere did through its energy efficiency education program, where we were asking people, what do you need? What do you want to learn? And we'll be doing the same thing as we work to engage trail users, asking them, how are you prioritizing wildlife right now? What are the challenges for you in helping to balance wildlife and other uses on this landscape? And we can build further where we're jointly leading projects together with community members, the way that we are doing now with Bow Valley Green Energy and community renewable energy generation. And we can even co-design conservation programs together with community members, the way that we're doing with wildlife ambassadors in our workshop series that we're implementing now. And so I would say to council and administration, please watch for the Biosphere Institute to be using a combination of these approaches going forward. And we hope that this is going to bring a lot of robustness and excitement in our community for our work. So I'll just do some quick operations updates. We launched a new website in April of 2019. This is integrated for the Biosphere Institute and WildSmart, which previously had separate sites. We have a lot more control over the functionality of this site. So if you haven't checked it out, please do, biosphereinstitute.org. We are releasing our 2019 annual report by the end of the day today. So if this presentation is of interest to you and you would like to learn more, please go on our website and check out our annual report. This year's report will feature stories of community members who have helped us to achieve success over the last year. And we also implemented a new financial management system in 2019, which has really helped the organization with financial planning and forecasting, which, as you can imagine, has been very beneficial to us during this time. And then finally, I'll just close with some information for the town about how we leverage your contribution at the Biosphere Institute. So in 2019, we had a very good year for fundraising. We had a number of funders that committed to projects that ran into 2020, which is certainly helping us at this time. For every $1 that the town of Canmore invested into Biosphere core funding in 2019, the organization raised an additional $6.60. This included very significant contributions from the province of Alberta, including Energy Efficiency Alberta, which provided a lot of support for the SHIFT program. We brought on new funders for our youth education programs, including the Canadian federal government and the W. Garfield Weston Foundation. I think this is a real testament to the strength of the ideas that came out of our strategic planning process for education. We recently received a new contribution as well for education from the National Science and Engineering Research Council, and we continue to be supported, of course, by a number of long-term funders such as Lafarge, the Banff Canmore Community Foundation, the MD of Bighorn, and others. So I hope that the town continues to see the Biosphere Institute as a good investment. I know I've gone over time here, but we welcome questions at any time from any of you. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. There's a lot going on with Biosphere. It's hard to cram it into 15 minutes. I get that. Are there questions from members of council for Biosphere this time? See none, thank you both for being here and continuing to do this work that really is of critical importance to our community. So because I sit on the board, I'm more familiar with everything that's going on, and there's a lot going on. It's really a going concern. So thanks for all that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All righty, we'll see you again. And now we'll move on to a presentation from Three Sisters Mountain Village, Area Structure Plan Applications and Community Engagement Plan. And look at that, we have Mr. Olenberger joining us.
Yes, and I believe Michelle Gurney will be joining us as well.
And Ms. Gurney, hi. Okay, you've got 2 minutes.
I'll try and make it happen.
Nope, you've got lots of time, so jump on in.
Okay, well, thank you, Mary Borman and Canmore Council, for the opportunity just to give you a very brief update on how things are going on the area structure plan work. I think the end summary is that it continues to be a work in progress, and there's a lot of work going on in the background that we're just going to update council and the community briefly on today. So I will turn on a presentation and away we'll go. It wouldn't let me pre-start it from Zoom, so apologize for the brief delay. So we're looking to just give you an update on the area structure plan and the supporting studies, which a numerous amount are going on. Some are completed, some are still in progress, and of course, engagement, a very important factor of our work here coming up today. As council knows, we've made some progress with the Government of Alberta decisions that support council's decisions in the future. We have the wildlife corridor established, which means that we can bring both ASPs forward as a holistic vision. And we've also worked closely with the town of Canmore recently, and I know that council was updated on it, updated undermining regulations that provided more clarity and better guidelines with how to do the work. We've been continuing to work closely with the town administration to make sure that the area structure plan submissions are complete. And a lot of that is scoping the supporting studies, making sure that questions that are of interest to the community and the administration council get addressed. And then, of course, responding to all of that work and that hard effort through policy writing in the CELs and policy set by town of Canmore. Mayor Borman, I did forget, this slideshow has 2 slides that are slightly different from the original submission within your town council agenda. slide 7 and slide 9, I'm not sure the page numbers in your agenda, I apologize, are just clarified so that they provide a better answer and a better clarity about the study state, the timing of submission to town administration, and that where we're at in the writing of draft ASPs and how they'll be used with engagement. So I apologize for not noting that earlier.
Yeah, and that's mostly the detail under the engagement process on that slide.
Yes, slide 9, that's correct.
Thank you.
So this is a concept map for Three Sisters Village. As you can see, there are some really core different districts within there. The village center, which is envisioned as a vibrant pedestrian-centric mixed-use village in the focal point. This will be the main destination for residents and guests with a wide range of commercial uses. We, of course, have a more boutique hotel and spa district just off to the side, which is a bit more secluded and quiet for hotels and a spa facility, a different environment than the village center would present. The Innovation District is a new idea, and I think a pretty exciting one. It's a place to support current and future diversification of Canmore's economy, diverse range of uses like creative manufacturing, light industrial, live-work units, artist lofts, that kind of thing. Indoor Recreation District is an area to provide another hub for recreation, entertainment, senior lifestyle opportunities, family and sporting activities. There's quite a variety in there. And again, it's a bit of a new idea, but we think it's an interesting one. And of course, to make commercial tax base successful, we have to have a residential district, which can accommodate a wide range of residential building forms. And that way we can have, so to speak, the community around the village center to help support the center along with the rest of Canmore. You can see that there's a broad number of spaces for municipal parks and open spaces and even resort center recreation amenity areas. And we've tossed around ideas like mountain bike training centers and things like that. Smith Creek is the eastern section, of course. It's a little bit different in nature. This is more of a locals housing type of initiative that we're looking at with a potential school site. You can see by the little school black icon in the center. The red is again a build on of light industrial, retail, and commercial purposes to continue to augment Town of Canmore's economic goals. So we have now reflected this plan to show the government approved wildlife corridor. And you can see that there will be a parkway crossing of that corridor and another wildlife crossing structure on the Trans-Canada Highway proposed within this work as well.
Mind if we interrupt during your
No,
presentation?
of course not.
So on this slide, what are those light blue patches on the Smith Creek area?
The little blue areas here,
Yeah,
those are potential storm ponds. So where we
Okay.
would put stormwater ponds located.
all right. And all of the sort of yellowy, greeny areas, that's all meant to be residential,
That's correct.
but without any more detailed. You don't know what kind of residential at this time?
It provides for a mix of building forms, Mayor Borrowman. So, you know, the topography out here is pretty rolling and undulating, as many Canmorites know. And so the building forms will respond to that topography, you know, and also consider the operational challenges and costs long-term about, you know, for example, how many lift stations do you put in? Make sure that transit is efficient and works through this section. Make sure that bike pathways and stuff like that are accessible. So there's gonna be a lot of balancing of factors there. But it is, again, a range of residential housing opportunities, although they tend to be more in that missing middle range as much as we can within the topography.
Uh-huh. And on the previous slide, Three Sisters Village, the curious how many units there might be room for in like the Innovation District. Just trying to get a sense of the scale.
So the total absolute max of the Three Sisters Village area is probably around 4,900 units or so. I don't have the breakdown of the Innovation District in front of me, but that would be the total within this area generally. And that would be a pretty aggressive total, Mayor Borrowman. That's more of a maximum. I wouldn't say that that's the likely outcome.
Okay, I guess we'll wait to see more detail when the ASP comes forward. One other question on this slide, the undeveloped space to the east of the creek there that backs in against Hubman. what's Three Sisters thinking on that space at this point?
I think you'll recall, Mayor Borman and Council, that we had been looking previously at developing this area with a number of different uses. However, we've been doing engagement on these area structure plans, as you know, for a variety of years now, about 5 or so. And some of the comments that we heard previously are reflected within this plan, and this is one of those areas. So we are looking more for recreational opportunities on the east side of the creek behind Hubman. And I would also say that we'll be using some of this space to address Steep Creek mitigation implementation. As you know, Three Sisters Creek does have a steep creek hazard. There is an impacted area right now in the existing residents of like Miskow, Casali, Curzan, and we're going to be doing some work jointly with the town there to mitigate that impact.
Great, thanks for that.
You're welcome. So it's a great question, Mayor Borman, to talk about the purpose of ASPs. Of course, they support mainly a policy planning framework for future applications. So they're not intended to provide right down to the last building structure exactly what will be seen there, where each and exact building will be and the exact building forms in each spots, but they do provide that policy planning framework such that people know broadly what is going to be happening. This is, of course, followed up by future conceptual schemes, land use, subdivisions. And so this is basically the first step in outlining what will become in the framework. The supporting studies and other tools articulate those benefits and impacts of development for community while also balancing environmental, social, and economic considerations. And they create an understanding of how future detailed applications would work, like what is the spectrum of housing type? How do we make sure there's continued growth in active transportation modes like walking and cycling? How do we grow Canmore's economy through diversification? How do we provide new recreational amenities and parks, mitigation of steep creeks and addressing undermining, and of course, supporting sustainability and climate considerations.
And sorry, just to jump in again, that last bullet point, did you have anything, you can flesh that out at all? I mean, I'm curious. When you say those words, what's in your mind?
Right now, we actually have a pretty strong list that's been put forward to the ownership group of Three Sisters. And as a team, we're going through it. It's pretty extensive. There's a lot of ideas. We've gotten great feedback from the community on things they would like to see. We've had ideas put upon us through various methods at our workshops. So we're going through all of those. Some of them may require regulatory changes and elevation that we can't do. Others would be things that we can do. So we're going through the list of how do we implement sustainability? How do we do green building? How do we do energy efficiency? What are the opportunities perhaps for implementing geothermal? We've got a wide range of different opportunities there. So we're going through them to say, are they possible within our current regulatory framework? Where would we put them? How would they integrate with other initiatives within the community? And then we bring that forward as part of the ASP. Some of these ideas, though, I will tell you, may not be suitable to put within an area structure plan document, but might be a side document that can explain these things. So we're working on both of them at the same time.
Well, that's great. I'm certainly looking forward to that part of the conversation.
We are too. I think we've really got some exciting ideas, and I know the ownership group is spending a lot of time going through them in detail and trying to figure out as many as they can.
Great, thank you.
So in the supporting technical studies, this is one of the slides that's updated. You know, there's a number of studies that are complete. There are a number of studies that are nearing completion now. And as they are completing, you know, we've had to adjust some of our processes to work with the town staff. COVID-19, just like everybody else, has had an impact. So instead of putting a 3-foot high stack of reports on somebody's desk and saying, here you go, we've been putting them forward as they get completed in stages. They're more of a bite-sized, manageable parcel to review for the town. They can make sure that with the staffing that they have in place, they can focus on the task in front of them. So some of the studies you see here are just in the final stages of completed, like the TIA, the Transportation Impact Assessment, and the Environmental Impact Study, and that of course will be reviewed by a third party. The Socioeconomic Impact Assessment is in its final stages of completing as well. It's just looking at some interviews with some community members, same with the Fiscal Impact Assessment. But the Steep Creek Hazard Assessment I actually just got, I think, the final draft of that today that I'll be sharing with Felix and others within the town to make sure that that's on track. And the area mining impact overview is underway as well. Servicing analysis, stormwater, sanitary, water, those are complete and have been submitted to the town, who is currently reviewing them. And I've seen a final draft of the Fire Smart assessment as well. I think it's important to note, much of these are in Three Sisters viewpoints, a lot of update work. They're not brand new territory. We've of course got a year's worth of data in this area, but we're making sure that they're aligned with the feedback we've been getting for the last few years. And I think this is Robin's turn. Robin? Or Robin, Michelle.
Robin, I was
Sorry.
waiting for our manager of communications to join you with this, huh?
Her name was bigger below Michelle's face, so I apologize for that, Michelle.
No, thanks so much, Chris, because I actually just wanted to ask Robin if you could give me a quick time check. I know we're taking questions within the presentation, but I just want to be respectful to the time we have.
I have about 5 minutes left. I have been trying to pause when questions have been asked.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much. So firstly, thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to share the update and the important background on engagement. And I know, Chris, you've already flagged a few things that I was going to talk about, so that's wonderful. I'm glad those questions were raised. Really, when it comes to the engagement work we're doing with Three Sisters, we have two goals, and it's to ensure that we're being transparent in our process and also that we're listening to input that comes from across the community. And so, as you heard Chris say, the engagement with this that you're going to see in these updated ASPs that are coming forward actually dates back to 2015. So 5 years of input. And we've heard a lot of really important things that I'll speak to in a few minutes. But that 2015 dates back to the establishment of the Smith Creek Advisory Group, which really helped to shape the 2017 Smith Creek Amendment. And it was at that time that the community started to ask questions about the unfinished golf course as well, which led to engagement beginning then on what we now call the village. And so we've looked back at all of that input. And of course, you heard Chris say that in those concept maps, you can already see that we had input from the Hubman community at that time that said, please consider recreational amenities or green spaces behind our development. And you'll see that input has been incorporated into the draft ASPs. So we've also since then, we've hosted a number of different formats, different types of engagement. We've done work with active community groups, going out to meet with them, sitting in on their regular meetings, asking to provide presentations. And we've also worked to reach the broad community, really by showing up where they already are. So you've seen us out at farmers markets, at Christmas markets, in front of the grocery store. And really our intent has been to try to speak to people wherever we can, to hear from really the diversity in the community. And we've provided previous What We Heard reports that focus on the topics that have been raised the most for our team. And in addition to these engagement efforts, there's been a lot of communication work as well. We've produced documents that clearly outline the ASP process. We've been producing newsletters to provide people with timely updates on where we're at, and anybody can sign up for those. We've been working really closely with local media to make sure that they're able to provide updates as well. And also we've refined our, I don't know if you've noticed, but we did do a new website earlier in the year that would just make it easier for people in the community to find the information they're looking for faster. And we're seeing some nice traffic to that site. So over the last 5 years, we've heard a lot of input. And like I said, Chris already has flagged a few things and a few questions have come up, but it's been no surprise that affordable housing has been a key topic. And so in these ASPs, in the policy that you'll see brought forward, you're going to notice that there's policy that speaks to the availability of inventory for all ages and incomes, as well as diversification of building types. When it comes to the corridor, what was really important to people is the protection, preservation of the corridor. And so you're going to see, like Chris was speaking to, amenities, policy around amenities for walking and recreating for inside of these areas to keep people outside of those corridors, to keep them safe for the wildlife. So that will be good to see. We also noted that residents really wanted to see development that incorporates multi-modes of transportation and connections to the existing trail systems. So you'll see that reflected in the policy in the ASP. When it comes to amenities, people too were looking for things like grocery stores, restaurants, shops, health and wellness services that would really complement the downtown core and its vibrancy. You'll see that reflected in the ASP. When it comes to economic diversity, Chris already spoke about the importance of an innovation district and light industrial areas as well that will add to the economic diversity of community going forward. And so we've been here a few times talking about what we've been doing, the state of engagement, and really trying to show the spectrum of input we've had. But really the thing that we hear most often is do this right. And so these ASPs will really reflect the principles that have been important to the community and the issues that have been raised the most. So over the next couple of months, you're going to see us doing more work here. And Chris, I'll just ask you to advance that slide for me. Thank you. So as Chris said, the ASP work is coming forward with these studies that will be reviewed by the town. Throughout the summer, we'll be doing different types of engagement. We'll be relying on virtual platforms because of the implications of COVID right now. We're going to be reaching out to active community groups like we have in the past. And if there's anybody that we don't reach out to who wants us to come and talk to them about the SP process, what will be included, we'd love to do that. And really the purpose of that work is to raise awareness of this process, that it's happening, and to hear further input from the community on what they want to see in these ASPs, so we can reflect that back in the final versions that come forward. So we'll do that more focused engagement first, and then we'll move to broader community engagement again later in the summer. And the purpose then shifts a little bit more to raising awareness of what we see as the development benefits of these ASPs. And then in the fall, we're looking at that going to first reading. And then the town of Canmore, of course, takes over that public consultation process. So I know I was speaking quickly. I wanted to squeeze that all in. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. Thank you.
Thanks very much for all of that. I have a couple of questions just so I have better sense of what you are doing or intend to do. So on step 2, I know you've done a lot of engagement with various in various ways with the community. You reference conversations with active community groups. And do you have specific groups in mind that you're going to intentionally engage with?
Yeah, great question, John. We're looking at really any group that's active in the community. And like I said, if others come forward that we haven't identified, we'll add them. Right now, we're looking at groups like Rotary, Canmore Business Alliance, Seniors Group, CAMBA, CTA. We're going to engage with Biosphere, of course. They'll lend some real interesting perspectives to this work. WildSmart, Cyan is another group that's been raised as somebody we should reach out to, as well, even the board at the Canmore Museum. So we're looking at anybody who's in a group already, and then we'll add some diversity with some individuals who we know are really interested in arts and culture, and we'll bring their perspectives into those more focused discussions as well.
That's great, thank you. And so when you're doing that engagement, the ASP itself will not be complete, so you'd just be sharing visions. I mean, what would the community groups have to respond to?
John, that's another really good question, and Chris, feel free to add to whatever I say here, but what we would be looking at providing is just some high level detail on the proposed policies that will be brought forward, so that they can comment on those. And we'll be providing, before we do those sessions, there'll be communication materials as well that will say, here are the highlights of these policies. As well, we'll be doing, our intent is to do a series of podcasts on those supporting studies that Chris mentioned, speaking to the experts who've developed those, as well as third-party reviewers on things that are important for the community to know about and why those are important and what third-party reviewers look for. Those podcasts will be available. So in addition to these conversations, we'll have all of these support materials that help provide clarity on what's in the ASP.
Great. So I'm just trying to follow the flow. And Chris, did you want to add something to that?
If you wouldn't mind, Mayor Borman, as you can probably understand, engagement is a bit of a chicken and egg scenario in some cases. So the team will have the draft ASP materials prepared, and the town will, at some point in the summer, you know, whether it's July or what exact month it is, still yet to be determined. It depends on the progress we're making on our supporting studies. They would actually have a draft to provide input on. And so we do have that material available. If somebody wants to do a deep dive and actually engage further on it, it would be available, it would be there. But what we want to do is make sure that people don't think that just because we have some draft ASP policies written, that they're chiseled in stone, right? They're really, we're looking for that input during this period, and we're looking for that engagement during this period. So it's super important to us to make sure the right impression is there. It's actually not until the fall, which you see in step 4, in which we would take all of that great feedback and all of that energy and all of that engagement during the months to come here, and put that into the final submission. And that's really the stage at which, okay, you know, now the town has seen a draft, the community's seen a draft, and we're going through the, this is what we heard. There'll be another, this is what we heard report to make sure of, we told you this in say August, what did you do with that information, so that people will be able to track what changes were made, or if there weren't changes, why not? You know, so we want to make sure that we're clear on that type of information. So that's the chicken and egg scenario we're at. We don't want people to think that there isn't an opportunity for input into the area structure plan. This is absolutely all about input.
Yeah, and thanks for clarifying that. That was really the thrust of my question was I mean, it's clear to keep in mind, it's important to keep in mind that there won't be a final ASP application until after you've done all of that work. But to do that work, people have to have something to respond to or to refer to.
That's absolutely true.
And I was just referring in preparation for this presentation, I was looking back at the Three Sisters Village and Smith Creek ASP terms of reference that we approved back in 2018. And you know, under section 5, it details the phasing of how the plan moves forward. And through your report today, I'm seeing that this phasing matches what council had approved for in the terms of reference.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of toing and froing, I would suggest, Mayor Borman. You know, we had to make a little bit of alterations because of COVID in terms of specific nuances on timing and stuff. But generally, we're in phase 4, writing the plan right now, right? And then you can see that we're talking about submitting a draft area structure plan work to the town in a couple months. Confirming the plan is all about talking to the community and making sure we get that engagement. So we are following that town approved terms of reference.
Great. Yeah, so as you mentioned, the technical studies, some of which have been submitted and some of which I'm not quite ready. All of the feedback that you receive from the town on those studies then would go into refining or revising the draft plan that you've been working on.
That's correct.
Great. Was there more? You've given your presentation, or did you have more?
Unless you have further questions, Mayor Borman, I think that completes it. I think you can see it's a work in progress. There's lots of work to come. There's lots of engagement to come as well. But we're really excited. I think that there's really some interesting ideas on sustainability and conservation that we've worked in. We're working on a bunch of innovations like incentivizing further additional work when you actually get to the building stages on the ground. So that's just one of the list I have. I don't want to put everything out right now because then it wouldn't be very exciting in the summer, but I think you'll be pleased with the list to come.
Okay, well, then, thanks for being here. I don't know if other members of council have any questions at all on this important report. Seeing none. Councillor Seeley, did you have a question?
Yeah, just curious what your full spectrum of housing types means. We've learned a lot over the last 30 years. Wondering if you had some unique policy that you're considering.
I think the idea between the policy framework on the area structure plan process when it comes to it is to make sure that we're generating more of the missing middle type of housing spectrum. You've seen single family homes, of course, in Three Sisters and many other areas of Canmore. You've seen dense building forms as well in areas of the Cougar Creek subdivision, such as the 4-story apartment buildings and things like that. And you'll continue to see those denser forms of development for sure in the village, for example. But we're looking to really look at townhouses, row towns, stack towns, you know, duplexes in places, and then leading up to 4-story apartment buildings. Maybe you'll go a little higher within the densest part of the resort core. But the idea is to provide a spectrum of housing massing and models that is separate, of course, from the affordability considerations, but it's an important step that becomes part of that process. So then you can talk about, do you have deep subsidy, perpetually affordable, below market, all of that range. So we're talking a lot about massing in some cases, but it shouldn't be seen as separate and distinct about affordability. They do work hand in hand together.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just in thinking about this a bit more, it's good that it's working out, that you're able to bring or work on and bring forward both ASPs at the same time. I mean, I recall that was a big part of the conversation several years ago around the importance of being able to understand the future for all of the land. And so that's working out well. At the end of the day, I'm still curious about the development schedule or cycle, I suppose. Would the intent from Three Sisters to be to develop out the village ASP and then start on Smith Creek, or is there an opportunity to introduce some of the new elements that might be contained in the Smith Creek ASP at the same time? And I'm specifically thinking around the industrial and, you know, light manufacturing, that area, which is of high need here.
I think there's an opportunity to mix it, Mayor Borman. There's a lot of factors to that, right? We have to make sure that we have the servicing capacity at that end of the site to be available. You know, we do have an active quarry there. There is some overlap in ownership, as you're aware, but they are looking to see that the area structure plan in Smith Creek and the development opportunities is part of the reclamation plan of that site. And so if there's opportunities to bring it earlier to market and we can service it appropriately, I think that would be something of high interest. As you know, Three Sisters is looking to move forward with a commercial application near the four-way stop on the Three Sisters interchange in the not too distant future as well. So I think you'll probably see a mixed bag of phasing. It'll be generally sequential. They'll always have some good planning logic to it, but there is a market influence, right? Is Canmore and the market ready to adopt some new light industrial? Today, I think there is some market. For sure, I would agree with you. Do we have all the technical studies servicing Pigeon Creek mitigation sorted out at that end of the property to engage on it tomorrow? Probably not, but it's certainly something we could adjust on the schedule of phasing.
Okay. Thanks. That's pretty much the same careful answer I get every time I ask, so no surprise.
Well, if we didn't have a quarry there in Pigeon Creek, we probably could just say tomorrow, but there's a couple of things to go along the way.
I see. So then, bottom line, barring any unforeseen circumstances around the technical studies being completed and reviewed, we can expect to see a final ASP application in sometime in the fall, which fall begins the end of September. So sometime September, October, is that what you're thinking?
Yes, it is. It's a broad target, Mayor Borman. You know, we haven't picked a calendar date that says at all costs we shall enter into a final discussion and draft by this day. We want to make sure that the town has had the opportunity to look through the technical studies, had opportunity to do feedback on the ASP draft, made sure that Michelle's work on engagement is going well and that we've covered the bases we need to there. So I would look, we said fall because again, we didn't want people to think that we're just driving a schedule, right? We're making sure that we're hearing the input and that we're respecting that community engagement plan.
Okay, thanks very much. Are there any other questions at all? Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Just a question. You speak to community groups that might want to get involved, Ms. Gurney, with regards to the public engagement. Would I direct them to contact you by email?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, perfect. Thanks. That was my only question.
See no other questions, and thanks very much, both of you, for being here and helping to share this important information for our community and for council and then to keep up to speed with what your plans are. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you
Thanks
for
so
the
much.
opportunity to keep you up to date.
You bet. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
And with that, then we'll move to the EPCOR, Mr. Como or Mr. Letourneau, who's going to be up first here?
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor Borman and members of council. So like we do most, actually all years, we come in front of council after a year is complete, and we request EPCOR to come in and do a presentation to council on how things went the year before, their performance, largely based on the performance indicators that are in the contract, and an opportunity for you to ask any questions of EPCOR based on how things went the previous year. So with that, I will hand things over to Dennis Letourneau, who is the site manager for the Canmore operations.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is my first round with the Zoom meeting. Can you see the presentation slide okay?
Yeah, really honestly, you've never done a Zoom meeting yet?
You know what? In 20 years of consulting engineer around the world, I've given presentations in abandoned mosques in Indonesia. I've given presentations in -40, +40, all kinds of situations. This is my first remote meeting, so it's a historic moment. So we'll pause to recognize that. Pause is over. Here we go. I have quite a lot of information to get through, so I'm going to go fairly quickly, but obviously interrupt me at any time if you have any questions. I think by now it's fairly obvious that to everybody that it's widely recognized that EPCOR brings a deep bench of experience to Canmore. We can ramp up resources as required to deal with incidents like the 2013 flood or even the current pandemic situation. So we'll just move on. You've already received the PDF annual presentation, I guess about a week ago. So what I'm going to do instead is not read through that. What I will do is just touch on some operational highlights. We'll quickly look at the safety record, look at some water reports, and within the water reports, I do want to spend some time on the lead management program that's rolling out, as well as a discussion on water loss. We'll finish with community engagement and one final slide on looking forward into 2020, which we're well into. If you guys can all remember, it seems like a long time ago, but 2019 actually began with the worst ground frost event in 40 years in this town, if not more. We normally get 2 to 3 call-outs a year, during the winter, I should say, for frozen services. And between January and April of 2019, we fielded 107 call-outs for frozen services. All were restored within 24 hours, sometimes by thawing the pipes, other times by connecting temporary services. We also had a preventive maintenance program in place now for a couple of years. That's where an operator goes around for 1 day every week, spends the entire day checking out trouble areas. And he's looking primarily for frozen sewer situations such as you see here, taken before the program was implemented. That green pipe is the sewer line bringing everything down towards the wastewater treatment plant. And you can see white pipes along the top, and where the arrow indicates, you can see frozen mass there. That means that the pipe upstream of that is blocked, and anything that's coming from the residents on that pipe is being backed up into the house. So we're looking to prevent those situations. And when we do see that building up, we'll call in our portable pressure trailer. It can provide pressured water, or it can provide steam, and we'll stick the steam hose down there and we'll thaw everything out. By doing that, we've estimated we've saved 12 residences every year from a sewer backup through the winter. In the summertime, of course, we start the flushing program to clean the pipes from grease and grit. And in this situation, we're now for the second year in a row flushing twice certain areas on Main Street, on Railway Avenue, and here on Bow Valley Trail. In fact, they've paused here and they're about to signal me over because there's a 2x4 in the sewer system as I'm taking this picture. I could give you a 30-minute lecture on the things we find in the sewer system, but we'll see that for another presentation.
2x4, I don't know how that got down there.
Yeah, it's amazing. We did have a close call with our digesters. If you remember the tour you took a couple years ago, many of you walked with me up those stairs. Those are 7-meter high open air tanks. When you looked down, you saw generally 2 to 3 meters of sludge in liquid format waiting to be taken to the press building to be dewatered. We were getting readings of 4 meters, 5 meters, 6 meters of sludge. And so our on-call operator went over there because we couldn't believe the readings we were getting. We were pretty sure it was going to be just a defective level transmitter. But in fact, what he saw was 4 to 5 meters of this septic foam rising up in the digester on its way to the top. Now, if it tips over the top and lands on the ground, that's an environmental incident. So we quickly got hoses on it, and our certified operator, our lead hand, recognized that this kind of foam is a symptom of a particular kind of bacteria, and it points to septic loading, overloading. We quickly ran back and checked our records, and sure enough, one of the contract septic hauling companies in town had been dumping considerably more septic loading than he had historically. So we addressed that situation, and then we got to work on controlling this with by turning over the sludge and getting the biology restored, and we got that back down. But if some of you are old enough to remember watching bad 1950s B movies, this was just like that. It came very close to going over the top. We had an interesting phenomenon where our lab numbers were showing that our filters that remove tan, which is a fancy name for a particular kind of ammonia, didn't seem to be performing to spec. We saw the tan coming in, we measured it, we knew how many filters were online, we knew what to expect going out of the plant, and what we were measuring coming out of the plant was higher. It implied that our filters were underperforming, which I could not believe, because if you recall, we rehabbed all these filters just 3 years ago. So I'm a mechanical engineer. I didn't do a lot of biology and chemistry at McGill, so we brought in a process engineer from Edmonton. These guys live, eat, breathe chemistry and biology. He quickly went through the process, and his theory was that we were actually generating some tan within the process of the plant. We put in temporary tan analyzers, and sure enough, it verified his theory. So the net effect of this is that we needed to not only know what tan was coming from the town, we needed to know what was generated within the plant and what was hitting our filters. So thanks to the tan removal capital project, we were able to install this tan analyzer, which is mounted on the vertical post right upstream of the filter, so we know exactly what's hitting them. We know how many to stage, and we have another one installed right after the filters, so we can actually in real time measure the performance of the filters. And if anything's going sideways, we'll have an early warning system to react. I'm going again very quickly through these to try and respect the time. Lift station 2 upgrade, again, that was completed last year. Not only is it aesthetically pleasing, but it's functional, it's safe, and it's a perfect example of how you should build a lift station. Same with lift station 6. A lot of the components were at end of life, including the wet well, which was deteriorated to the point where it was going to be unsafe to continue to use it. So the wet well, which is the circular object in front of the shed, was replaced, as well as all the interior components, generators, instrumentation, and whatnot, on time, on budget by Boone Coy, the project manager who does a lot of the projects for us here in Gamwell. This is the one I'd hoped to take you on a tour on this year. I'm hoping eventually we'll get you over there. If you recall on your tour, the very last step for the sludge was it went into the building on the right, and upstairs was a big belt press. It looked like a big ancient printing press, and we would press the sludge, literally pressing the water out of it. And what would be delivered into the trailer was about 15% solids, 85% water. That press building that so many of you saw was located in the upper left picture there in that room. That's actually where you were. And what it has been replaced with is 2 centrifuges. So rather than pressing this water out of the sludge, we now spin it out of the sludge. The net effect is, instead of sending 15% solids into that trailer for composting, it's now increased to 22% solids. And an example of the kind of savings was last year, because the town, as a result, hauled less water, you saved about $73,000 in haulage fees. You can see in the bottom left, 2 of the trailers now enclosed. It's not subject to environment, so where the rain is increasing the wetness of the product, or in the wintertime it's freezing. Now it's enclosed inside the building, and there's an automatic auger that evenly distributes the solids within the trailer. So quite a fancy system, and hopefully we'll get you over there once the COVID situation is rectified. All we have to say about the safety record is that we had another year of no lost time incidents. Our operators received on average 32 hours of safety training. Some of that was done in exercises such as this, where Blaze, our safety dummy, has gotten himself into yet another predicament, and we have to rescue him out of the hole. So here he is, Brendan Jenner, our longest serving lead hand, is leading the exercise where we are actually bringing Blaze up out of the hole he's got himself into so that he's in a safe location where we can administer first aid. All that really has to be said about the water reports is that the water produced from pump houses 1 and 2 met all water quality guidelines in 2019 that are listed there, as well the treated effluent from the wastewater treatment plant met all approval limits going out. There were no violations on potable water or treated effluent. Now let's spend a bit of time on the lead in the drinking water. In March, Health Canada reduced the maximum acceptable concentration from 10 to 5 micrograms per liter, halving it. And whereas in the past, that had to be met when you handed the water over from the public system to the private system, now they want to see that new maximum being met right at the very end of the private system at the actual tap of the residence. So when we look at how we're doing right now in the public system, there are no measurable levels of lead in the Canmore public distribution system. We measure water out of the pump houses regularly, and we've never found detectable limits. So if there is any, it's below the 0.2 micrograms per liter detectable limit. We then take that water and we distribute it to the public, and we use ductile iron, PVC, copper, but there is no lead in our public distribution system. So we know we're handing over that water with no detectable levels of lead. But now we need to be focused on what's actually coming out of the taps at the far end. So Canmore and EPCOR have put together a monitoring program that's in accordance with the AEP guidelines. And we'd hope to start it. Of course, things are delayed temporarily by COVID because of the risk associated with entering in private homes for testing. But when this gets rolling, we will be testing 60 locations initially per the guidelines. Half of them have to be in the highest risk homes, which will be any homes built before 1960. The other 50% will be spread over the community in accordance with the guidelines. And those results, then when they're received, will be communicated to the resident within 14 days, as well as to Alberta Environment. Are there any questions on the lead testing before I move on to the water loss?
No, it appears not.
All right.
Wait a sec, Councillor Hillstead.
So how do you determine which hoses get tested? Like, are you just going to knock on doors, or is it just?
No, that's a good question. There are 5 stratum of risk in the guidelines. The first 2 stratums do not apply to Canmore. Those are homes with known lead service lines. We're not aware of any lead service lines in Canmore, so we actually drop already to stratum 3. And stratum 3 is homes built before 1960, and that's where 50% of them have to be 50% of our tests have to occur in these stratum 3 risk homes. There is going to be a random sampling of homes within that category. And then the residents will have to give permission to enter, permission for the results to be shared with AEP. And then we follow a very strict protocol that's governed by our technical services group on how to conduct the test. And then the results are provided back from the lab.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I wanted to spend also some time on water consumption. So what you see here is a graph of the entire amount of water produced by both pump houses combined from 2008 to 2019. We know the height of these graphs because we have the flow meters on the pumps at the pump houses. So that's a known quantity. We also know the level of the light blue area. That is the water for which the town received revenue, because we get that by adding up all of the water meters in all of the residences and buildings around town. So those are the 2 known quantities that we can graph. The thin blue, or sorry, the thin green stripe, it's about 2% of production is what the town is using in its municipal buildings. And then what remains above the dark blue area is either water lost through leakage, or it's been authorized but not billed, such as running the bleeders in the winter, or hydrant flushing, or flooding the rinks, things like that nature. That dark blue area has averaged about 30% over the time period that's shown. And in fact, last year, it was exactly almost 30%, I think 30.3. So looking strictly at that dark blue area, you'll see that 24% of the leaks were unidentified, 3% were repaired leaks, and 3% were the other ones. These are all, to a certain extent, estimates because we have no water meters on these leaks and this authorized but unbilled usage. But we're using standard tables and making our best guesses when we do find leaks as to what the equivalent size of the hole was and that sort of thing. So there's a certain degree of estimation in here, but we do know that overall it's averaged about 30%. Now, what is the impact of the 30% loss? The town has a goal of 10%. We're at 30%. What is the impact of this extra 20%? Is there an impact on the capital programs? Is there an impact on operational costs? The only capital program that's impacted potentially by this excess water loss would be the current Pump House 2 design exercise. Pump House 2 was and is being designed by SEMA to meet a full build-out population of 33,000. And in doing that, they arrived at the number of 225 liters a second. Now, you don't design pump houses to meet average demand. You have to find the worst day. And the peak day is generally a hot day in the summer where everyone's watering. And on top of that, you get high visitation. So you've got the hotels full, you've got the restaurants full, you've got watering going on. That's your worst day. That's your peak day. And you start with
Dennis,
that.
I just, excuse me, I wanted to give you a quick time check. You're at 15 minutes.
Okay, I think that's the last of the major topics. So after that, it's going to be clear sailing. So they took the peak day at this full build out scenario, and they added the 10% safety factor, and that's where they came up with 225 liters a second. That's the peak day that Pump House 2 is being designed to meet. If we were to get our water loss down from 30% to 10%, and that has always been the goal, that would result in a reduction of demand on Pump House 2 of 8 to 9% in that full build out scenario. That's not going to change the configuration of Pump House 2. You're not going to be able to eliminate a filter bed or reduce your distribution pumps by one. It's going to look the same and it's going to cost the same. That doesn't mean we're not trying to get it down there, of course. The town's goal is to get to 10%. We're trying to get there. Is there an operating cost? Yes, I've estimated it to be about $24,000 a year. It's conservative. It's probably less than that, but that's an operating cost that EPCOR absorbs against our bottom line. It's a fixed price contract, so we take that hit. We'd love to eliminate that. So obviously we're working with the town to eliminate the leaks. We did buy new leak detection equipment in 2017, state-of-the-art equipment, and our hope was that we would detect and locate 5 or 6 significant leaks on the main distribution system. We'd dig down, we'd fix them, and we'd get ourselves down to that 10%. That was our hope. What transpired over the last few years, from 2016 to 19, is there were 25 leaks repaired. 21 of them surfaced, and we fixed them. 4 of them did not surface, but we found them with the leak detection equipment, and we actually were able to pinpoint the location. We excavated down, we fixed them. Despite the over $700,000 of money that this town spent on repairing these leaks, we did not see the overall water loss very much from that average of 30%. So we have concluded that in fact we are addressing the main distribution leaks. They're either surfacing and we fix them, or they're hidden and we find them and we fix them. So we're going to shift our focus, and we have begun shifting our focus over from main detection to looking at all of the services, what we call water services. And those are the little branch lines off the main distribution pipes that go to every little resident in every little building. There's over 6,000 of them. Each of them has a valve called a CC that controls the water to that service that can be isolated. And by locating these CCs and listening on them, we can detect the leaks audibly. And if we do hear something, then we'll bring in the acoustic detection equipment to try and pinpoint exactly where it is. Again, the number of potential locations of these leaks is going to really depend on the size of the leak. You know, a 1/8 hole will give 4,000 cubic meters a year of leakage. A 3/4 inch hole will probably get about 80,000 to 100,000 cubic meters a year. So it's really going to depend on the size of these leaks. But in the best case scenario, we would find 5 or 6 leaks. On these services, they'd have to be pretty much wide open. Then we dig down, fix them, and at a roughly average of $30,000 a repair, we'd have it done. But at the higher end of the scale, and then where it's speculation, but my expectations are that the remaining leaks are going to be spread throughout those 6,000 services. And it could be 50, it could be 100. And we know that the average repair cost, again, has over the last 4 years been 30,000, regardless of whether it's a main break or whether it's a service leak. It's not fixing the leak, it's excavating to get down to it that costs so much. And it's, of course, filling the hole and repaving.
Just
Sorry.
before you move on, I have a couple of questions around that water loss. It seems to me when I was first elected on council 15 years ago or whatever, there was a similar presentation at that time with similar number. It seems to me we were identifying somewhere around 30% water loss from our lines at that time. And I think that's when town set the target of 10%. And I appreciate this is a difficult task, but I'm curious, I mean, new leaks must happen regularly as well. And so we're finding and repairing leaks, but we don't seem to be catching up with the water loss. Is that simply, or is that possibly because for every leak we find, a new one occurs?
Because the focus has, oh, sorry, that's a good question, Mayor Bowman, and the focus has been always on the public system, which is primarily the main distribution pipes. That's where the big leaks occur, and that's where the town has responsibility. Once you pass the CC, that little valve, you're now into the private responsibility. So our focus has been on the public system. And this is the first time that we're venturing into the border between the public system and the private system. So we have, and you can appreciate, Mayor Bowman, a lot of these CCs, especially in houses that date back to the 60s and 70s and 80s, are buried under 40 years of landscaping or new driveways and that sort of thing. We can avoid having to access those if we need to isolate these lines by temporarily freezing the line. So we haven't asked the town to spend millions of dollars to start digging up people's front yards to restore these CCs when we have a perfectly acceptable workaround. But now we are going to have to access these CCs to listen to them. So we'll see how successful we are in finding them and listening in on them. We did have an early success. I have to say, just in the last week, we've actually located one CC that is by going beyond our zone of responsibility. Normally we're responsible for CCs once there's a building built and occupancy is granted, then the CC becomes our responsibility. But our lead hand took the initiative to actually listen in on CCs on empty lots out in the Three Sisters Mountain Village area. And we did find actually an empty lot where the service had been installed, the CC had been installed, it had been backfilled, but the CC had been left open and there apparently was no cap on the service. The cap is normally there to keep the dirt from getting in. And when he listened in, he could hear the water rushing out. And if that was wide open, we estimate that there was probably 100,000 cubic meters of water a year going out of that pipe. That's 1/5 of the way to getting to our goal of 10%. Now, ideally, we'd find 4 more of those, but I doubt that's going to be the case. My expectation is that most of those lots, if not the remainder of them, are all properly capped and closed, and that the remainder of these leaks are going to be spread throughout the 6,000 services in town.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of work. Just in thinking around designing for the maximum build out, as you mentioned, the 30,000 or whatever. So when you're designing for that need, the production for that need, is it sort of automatic to increase the water required by 20% or something to accommodate for future leaks?
So actually, when SEMA designed for Pump House 2 build-out scenario, they assumed about 360 liters per day per person. That's by taking all of the water, and this is a response to your question, this is by taking all of the water that's produced, including the water that's lost in leakage, and putting it over the population.
Okay.
Now, we're currently running at about 400 liters per person per day, and we have been at that for the last 3 or 4 years. So in designing for this in the future, they actually did factor in some efficiencies that were going to have to be achieved between now and full build out to meet that 225 liter demand day, be it through reduction of leaks or be it from efficiencies in the population or a combination of both.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McCallum, you had a question as well?
Thank you, Mayor Barman, and thank you, Mr. Letourneau, for your presentation. I'm sad we're not golfing this month. Golfing terribly. I'm just wondering if you could, I'm just curious as to what a typical range for leaks are in other municipalities. How do we compare?
It's a good question, and it. I think we went through. Actually, I might ask Andres to step in because I know there was a baseline exercise that we undertook a few years ago with different communities, but it really is dependent on what you're adding up and what you're quantifying, and if it's not apples and apples, it's very hard to compare. Andres, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is difficult to do a comparison, largely because our soil conditions vary compared to other municipalities. So for example, because we have very granular soils, when there is a leak, they don't surface. They just continue along with the groundwater that we have. Whereas a community that doesn't have a lot of granular soils, when there is a leak, most of that water actually comes to the surface, and it's an advantage to their operations because they can identify and isolate them much quicker.
Okay. And I have another question that's not related to these set of slides as well, but I can wait to the end if you like, or I can ask it.
Let's finish the presentation and then we can do
Yeah,
some
sure,
general
no
questions.
problem. Thank you.
We're almost there. Just last thing is community engagement. We were at the Mountain Market. We were at the Public Works Day. We were at the, we had a water station set up at the Folk Fest. And we were educating the public on conservation measures as well as what not to flush down the toilet, answering questions about metering and billing, etc. And we actually were invited into a classroom at Lizzie Rummel School last year. The students in one of the schools, I think this is Jenny Faraty's class, actually created their own water filters, and they wanted to see what the water quality was coming out. So we sent in an operator with turbidity meters, and we actually measured the quality of the water coming out. So the kids were fascinated with that, and they learned quite a bit. There's only one slide on the strategic initiatives. We are going through ISO 14001 certification right now in Canmore. Essentially, I can walk into any ISO 14001 site in Southern Alberta and within 10 or 15 minutes find all the information I need. So it's an environmental management system that's standardized, and we'll be audited every year to make sure we're following that. The one that the operators are excited about is the Hawkwims licensed software. It's more geared towards the technical side of things, but to give you an example of how it can be applied, right now our operators are on their rounds at lift stations writing down their observations and information on a clipboard, and then they take this pile of papers back to the plant at the end of the day and they transcribe them into Excel, and then they're checked by the lead hands for anomalies and so on and so forth. In the Hawkwims scenario, the operator actually shows up with a tablet on site. He enters his information, his observations and data onto the tablet. It's downloaded immediately to the database at the plant. We can flag automatically things the lead hand should look at, and it's ready for incorporation in the report. So it's just one of the advantages we're looking at. The 2020 capital program is well underway. You have a list of those projects in the handouts you received, so I won't read through them here. Instead, I'll just wrap it up. Thank you for the extra time, and I'll just open it up to questions.
Thanks very much. Councillor McCallum, you had a question.
Did too. Thanks for thinking of me. Now that the water content is decreased in our mass, I'm wondering if we're able to haul to biosolids to Banff now.
I think I'll just let Andres respond to that.
Yes, good question. I know that was one of our drivers, was to be able to support our the town of Banff and their operations. And what I can do, we can certainly take our product there now. It certainly meets the conditions regarding solids content. And I don't know if I can provide any more detail than I don't know at this point. I know the town of Banff is looking at different scenarios to deal with their biosolids, and we may be able to participate with that or not. I unfortunately don't have any more details at this point.
So I was curious about the same thing. Are you not sure what you're saying? Is the Enviro program not operating right now, or?
Oh, it is operating right now. And we can certainly connect with the town of Banff to see what their long-term plans are and see if there's an opportunity for us to participate with their program.
That would be great. Yeah, my recollection was it was one of the main instigators to go to this dewatering.
Yes.
At great expense. Did you have another question, Councillor McCallum? I'm just curious. You talked about the there was something on one of your slides talking about the grease and solids in the lines, and made me think of the epic poo race. So with the benefit of a few years now since the epic poo race, have you noticed any improvement in that, or are people still flushing everything they can think of down the toilet?
We still see quite a variety of items coming towards the wastewater treatment plant without going into detail. But one of the things I do conduct is school tours through the plants. I probably took about 12 different classes through the plant last year, and I'm finding anecdotally that's one excellent way to reach adults is through their kids. We show them what we're finding, and my own daughter was on our case a few years ago about recycling, and not about the water, but some of the things that we were putting in. We've got the compost program fully going now, and God help the person who accidentally puts a tissue Kleenex in the waste bin and not in the compost bin.
Yeah,
So
well, thank God for the kids. They keep us honest here.
Exactly. So I think by reaching out to them, we're getting to the parents, and I know a lot of people do enjoy the.
Seems to me one of the main concerns was grease from food services. Is that, have you ramped up in that way, or?
Yeah, we've had to put a hold on it because of COVID for doing the grease trap inspections, but some of the locations which were problematic before have turned around, and we can see from the closest manholes downstream that they've been undertaking better efforts to ensure that grease isn't getting into the line. So slowly but surely, we're making inroads into that.
Excellent. That's good to hear. Are there other questions from members of council? Councillor Hillstead.
I'm just curious, how long was the 2x4 that you found?
Oh, it actually was. I couldn't see the other end of it, but it was not the full length. They eventually extracted it. I had to get going, but I did see the front of it poking out, and we all wondered how it got down there. But we can say that for a lot of things we find.
Why, were you missing one, Councillor Hillstead?
No, I just wanted to know how long someone managed to get one in there. It was like one.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah,
4 foot piece,
All right.
I'll see if we have a picture.
Any other serious questions? Seeing none, thanks folks for being here, Mr. Letourneau and Mr. Como. Appreciate this update. It's actually fascinating. Your whole world is fascinating.
Thank you.
Weirdly, strangely fascinating.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
This time I'll move on to the minutes, I believe. Yep, minutes of the May 19th Committee of the Whole meeting. Are there errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll move they be approved as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. I was looking to Mr. Letourneau for a vote before I realized he's not elected. And we're moving on to item E. What? Oh, it says break. Anybody feel we need to take a break or we can push through? Okay. Call a short break. There's not much left here. 10-minute break. We'll come back at 3 o'clock on the dot. Okay, then. It's 3 o'clock. I'll call the meeting back to order. We're missing Councillor McCallum. No, she'll catch up with us. Moving on then to item E1. Councillor updates. Usual process.
Excuse me, Mayor Borman.
Huh?
Sorry. You've skipped right over D, the staff reports and
Oh,
the opening
I
plan.
certainly did. I'm anxious here. So let's instead of skipping over item D, let's go to item D1, Cougar Creek update. And who's providing that? Mr. Camille.
Hello.
Hello? You're on.
I'm on. Sounds good. Yeah, I was wondering too if you were just going to skip over.
Well, you know, I was just killing time until Councillor McCallum got back.
That's okay. I'm just going to share my screen here. And start this presentation. Can you guys see the full screen?
Well, we see the next slide in your comments, and so the screen itself is smaller.
Okay, hold on.
I mean, it works that way, but.
This should work better. How about this?
That works way better.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so yeah, here I am to provide a verbal update on the Cougar Creek project. And yeah, let's get right into it. So I'll be providing a quick review of what the structure will look like to kickstart things here. And then I'll jump into project approvals, procurement process, what we've been going through in the last few months here. And then an update on the anticipated schedule and also impacts through construction. And then an update also for people on how to stay informed on the project throughout construction. So here's a rendering that you've seen before. I believe it's on our website, but also we presented this at the March 4th open house of what the structure will look like. And basically it's a embankment structure, embankment dam made mostly by with rock fill. It will be grassed up and to actually give it a more natural look. There is a spillway, an emergency spillway that's rock cut in the east abutment, as you can see here. It also features a permanent access road that will be built up to the structure and over the structure to provide access during operation for inspection and maintenance. And one of the main feature that's quite important is the low-level outlet, which is where the water will flow through permanently when the structure is built. So that's just the quick overview. I wanted to show this again to everyone.
Great.
So in terms of project approvals, so since the March, basically, this is where I'm starting for those approvals. We've received, well, basically the EIA and NRCB process has been concluded now with the order in council signature that was announced earlier this year. Something else too is the Alberta Park disposition required for to operate, maintain, and construct the structure is in place. We're just waiting right now for the signed copy of that, but it's all sorted. The government of Alberta has also determined that their consultation efforts with Treaty 7 First Nations are adequate. So that also formally closes that process. That was part of the EI. And we are expecting the water approval in the next few days here, let's put it this way, based on our most recent discussion with AEP. So with all those combined together, we're basically good to go for a construction start here.
Great. Only 6 years later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's been taking a few months, a few years, but we're there now. In terms of procurement process, so we've been through two different procurement process lately. The first one is a procurement of environmental services. And the next slides will talk a bit more about that. And then the one that's people are more familiar with is the procurement of construction services. And again, I will be discussing these ones a little bit more. So in terms of environmental services, due to the nature, the scale and location of the project, a third-party environmental consulting was required to minimize environmental impact during construction, and also to ensure that during construction we're in compliance with all regulations, and also with the commitments that we made through the EI process. So what we did is we issued an RFP, request for proposal, earlier this year, and we received more than 10 submissions for this work. The project has been awarded to Ridge Environmental Planning, which is a small Calgary-based company that actually, they have, I believe, 2 or 3 of their staff is actually Canmore-based, including their main environmental monitor that will be working with us on the project. So we believe that we'll be very well served with by the experience of the Ridge team on this project here. The very large procurement process that we finished not too long ago is construction services. And that one, we started a request for a pre-qualification process back in 2019, in late 2019. And through that process, we had 14 submissions from contractors throughout the country. And after review and a lot of basically background research, interviews, and all kind of other process, we shortlisted 5 contractors. And what's interesting with this process is, with the request for pre-qualification, is that only those 5 contractors could actually go through the next process of tender and providing a bid on the project. So the RFPQ was designed to actually minimize the number of bids basically that we're getting to some extent, and getting the qualification that we're seeking for this project. The tender was actually issued in March 2020, and 4 of the contractors selected submitted a bid. And not too long ago, the project was awarded to the lowest compliant bidder, which is Flatiron Constructors Canada Limited, for a contract value of $32.8 million. And that's for, that includes everything on the project, from ground zero to reclamation and landscaping at the end. Flatiron, who's Flatiron? Well, they're a very sizable heavy civil construction company. They do have quite a bit of experience in large civil projects in Alberta and the Rockies. So here are some of those examples that Flatiron has undertaken previously. So the Red Deer interchange, that's pretty new. That was a very large project that they've done in the last few years. Another one is the Athabasca River Bridge in Fort Mac. That was finished in 2011. The Edmonton Light Rail Transit Tunnel, that was done in 2013. And also the very long and curvy and really cool looking bridge in the Kicking Horse Canyon that was done in Golden, British Columbia. So those are regular civil projects to some extent. Now, in terms of experience in construction of dams and rehabilitation of dams, they were involved in the upgrades to Ruskin Dam in Mission, BC. That was completed in 2017. They are also part of the several contractors working on Site C in Fort St. John, BC. That's the very large BC Hydro project that's ongoing. And also they are just basically right now putting the finishing touch to the improvements to the Glenmore Dam in Calgary. That's been in the news if you've been following that a little bit. So Flatiron's Calgary office will be, is leading the project, and with many of their staff, project staff from the Calgary and the Bow Valley area. So it's a very local workforce. And they will also be working with several subcontractors and material providers that are regional, such as the Hilton Brothers, Burnco, E3K Engineering, McElhaney, Biosphere Custom Welding, AGF Rebar. So they've we're quite pleased actually with their subs that they're carrying on this project in terms of local content and regional. So that's very great to see. Now, in terms of anticipated schedule for the construction, we are expecting a July 2020 construction start, and it might actually start a wee bit earlier than that if everything goes well. And the construction will be throughout 2020 until the winter. At that point, they'll take probably a 2 to 3 months winter break, and depending, it's mostly related to very cold temperatures and heavy amount of snowfall. So we'll see how that goes. Construction is to resume in the spring 2021, most likely in March. And then right now it's anticipated that the construction will be completed by the end of 2021. And that's for the main structure, because there's still going to be some work to do in 2022, which is mostly going to be related to landscaping, reclamation, commissioning of the structure, and just if there's any deficiencies, will be done in 2022. Following 2022, we have a 2-year warranty period that the contractor will have to come and especially deal with the landscaping and reclamation. So the actual final completion of the project is going to be 2024, when Flatiron will not be involved in the project anymore. In terms of what we anticipate for impacts, especially regarding recreational access, so the construction will disrupt recreational access to Cougar Creek Canyon and some of the trails. So generally speaking, the 2 multi-use pathways along the sides of Cougar Creek will remain open, and there might be some short closures possible depending on timing, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. The Cougar Creek Canyon itself will be closed during construction. This is to ensure public safety and construction workers' safety, and also to increase construction efficiency of the project. The provincial trail network, such as the trails going into Lady Mac, Horseshoe Trails, Montaigne, will remain open. However, there will be some temporary closures in effect for some trails, some of those trails during the rock blasting. So we'll be doing blasting for the low-level outlet and also for the spillway. So in those times, some of those trails will be closed. So here you can see the parking lot is right here. And on the kind of west side of the creek, this is our multi-use pathway. So that will stay open up to Montaigne and Lady Mac. People will be able to cross Elkhorn Boulevard and go up on the east side to access their horseshoe trails. Generally speaking too, the hours of work will be Monday to Saturday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. However, there might be some times when there will be special permission for longer hours or work on Sunday, especially when it's work that's required to be back-to-back nonstop for some specific work happening on the project. Construction traffic will be accessing the site via Elkhorn Boulevard mostly. We'll turn right on by the Cougar Creek Rink, and then we'll actually there will be a new temporary ramp built that will bring construction traffic down to the bottom of the creek and follow the bottom of the creek all the way up to the project site. And then the multi-use pathways might be used for construction access on temporary basis. For example, at the beginning of the project, when to access, they will be using the west side, the west multi-use pathway to start the project. That side will be closed, but the other side will remain open. So here, that's what this little sketch represents. Going up Elk Run, turn at the rink, and then basically right here, this is where we're gonna have the ramp, very similar to the ramp that goes down on the downstream side that we currently have. So it's gonna be a gravel ramp going down, and then truck traffic will be at the bottom of the creek here. And that's why people will still be able to use the multi-use pathway on the sides. And the reason to going up the creek bed is to minimize the visual impact, noise, and dust for the residential area. Now, how can people stay informed on this project throughout the life of this project? So we do have a dedicated webpage for the project at canmore.ca/Cougar Creek. We are trying to actually keep that up to date as much as we can, and we'll be doing that throughout the life of the project too. On that webpage, people can also sign up to receive e-newsletters. Information is on that webpage, and it's going to be bi-weekly, monthly updates on the project. We'll also be using our regular channels that the town is using, Facebook, Twitter, Rocky Mountain Outlook, to keep people informed. We'll also have signs at trailhead and parking lot area that will show closures, detours, and such things to inform mostly recreationists accessing. And at Alberta Parks, we'll be posting updates on their advisories and public safety page about trail closure and the Cougar Creek Canyon closure. And then there's a dedicated email, that's cougarcreek@canmore.ca, for anybody to reach the project team that's being monitored, and then any requests there is being sent to the right person who can actually best answer the question. And I thought I should show this again, especially for people perhaps who have not seen this. It's a short animation, it's about a minute long, and I'll be discussing a few things along the way. So basically, this is a view from Elk Run. The structure is the far background, but you won't be able to see it too much. And then moving along the canyon, the creek, you can actually see the reclamation patches that will be built during the project. And then bird's eye view of the project here with the spillway and the embankment structure and the access road. From upstream of the structure, you can see where the water will go through the intake that will go through a little of outlet. And you can see a truck on the right side there. And this is basically a view going through the spillway if you were water, and then kind of going down the steep chute there to get back on the other side. And back to that bird's eye view. And then it's nightfall. So basically that's my update. That's what I want to share. And thank you for listening, and open for questions right now.
Thanks very much. It's really great to have all this detail. And it's also great to watch that little film again. It's kind of fun. You know, we could maybe rent it out as a water feature sometimes. It'd be a great ride down that spillway. Of course, you need to have water in it, so that's not going to work.
We're hoping to not have water in the spillway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm also really pleased to see that there's a number of local subcontractors involved. That's really positive.
Yep.
And so much of the thought you've put into how this works for the residents is really important. I don't know if you've already reached out to the contact group that we had used for years around information on Cougar Creek. If you reached out to that group in any way, or?
Yeah, so there's, I'm assuming you're talking about the newsletter that the email list that we had?
Yeah, I remember we used to have firstly, you know, weekly and then monthly and then semi-annually meetings with the Cougar Creek resident group.
Correct.
So they all have, I think they're on an email list. So
yeah, so that group is still on the or kind of a new e-newsletter that we have. Mm-hmm. And then Adam and I in communications were discussing about when we're going to be doing our first meeting again for the residents basically, and then the first few might be on Zoom, similar to this, and then hopefully transitioning to a live meeting at some point. But yes, this is still definitely in the books here.
No, that's good to hear. I think that was really important and valuable to allow the residents that regular opportunity to just come in and see what's happening this week or next week and ask questions and give feedback. That was one thing we did really well, I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the e-newsletter is definitely we're definitely hoping to be able to share kind of maybe a 2 to 3 weeks look ahead of what's being planned for the construction site, so that people will know what to expect. And same thing with the closures. We're definitely going to try to give people as much notice as we can for getting which trails will be closed when. But to remember is, on that note, most of the trails will be short-term closures. Most of the trails will be open during construction, apart from the canyon itself.
Great. And the environmental consulting team that you mentioned, would they be like on site, not every day, but regularly, seeing what's happening, or what would they do exactly?
Yeah, so the main environmental monitor will be on site. It won't be full time, but some days will be all day long, and it's going to be especially at the start of new activities. So anytime we start a new activity, especially such as blasting and tree clearing, things like that, we definitely need to have wildlife sweeps being done, looking out for dens and things like that. And then once the other very important one is erosion and sediment control, care of water, all those different things. So whenever there's especially a new activity, they will be coming out to site to monitor what's happening and making sure that the contractor is following all the plans that are in place. And prior to that, actually, and that's the work that we're undertaking with them right now, is reviewing all the contractors' plan in terms of what they're proposing to do for the care of water, erosion control. So that's what's going on right now. And also the environmental monitor is in charge of doing turbidity monitoring. So the contractor won't be doing that. We will be doing that during construction to ensure that the contractor is basically meeting all the requirements. And we are required to do also fairly long-term surface and groundwater monitoring for the project. So back in 2016, when we had done some early geotech investigation, we had done some water sampling, and then they will be doing water sampling again before construction starts, and then throughout the life of the project, and also after the construction is finished, it's complete, they will also be doing monitoring of surface and groundwater quality to make sure that the project is not affecting the water coming out of Cougar Creek.
And you mentioned blasting. So what should residents in Cougar Creek and Eagle Heights and all expect when it comes to blasting? I mean, what period of time, how many weeks or months or whatever would it go through? And just talk a little bit about what you expect to see with the blasting.
Yeah, so the blasting, it's going to be similar, rock blasting, similar to what is being done at the quarry on Grotto. There's going to be some noise impact for sure, and there's going to be two different moments we'll be blasting. The first one is going to be for the low-level outlet, so that's going to most likely happen in July this year, July, August. That's when we'll be starting that portion of the work. And then as soon as we have a better schedule from the contractor in terms of what their blasting plans are, because basically the way it works is they have to do some drilling, and then they install the charges, and then they actually trigger those charges to blast the rock. And the sequence, it could be done in a lot of very small blasts, or it could be done in a long series of blasts. So depending on their sequencing and their working plan, we don't know exactly right now if it's going to be, for example, 2 blasts a week, or it could be one blast a day, we're not 100% sure. But what we'll be doing is definitely sharing with the public what those plans are. And what we're asking the contractor is to keep it to a standard as much as possible. So if they believe they can do 4 blasts a week, we'd like it to be 4 blasts a week, Monday to Thursday, for example, at 1 p.m. every day, so that it's constant and people know what to expect. And the nature of this blasting, is it likely to rattle windows, or how big a blast is it? It's most likely going to be similar to either when they're doing avalanche control on Rundle, something similar to that. So the blast is actually in the rock, and then there's blasting mats being put on top. So it does decrease a little bit the noise, but it will be a pretty strong bang, basically, very strong fireworks. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the comparison to the avalanche blasting on Rundle is helpful. I mean, that's something we've all heard. So yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly, like with the canyon and the noise back and forth. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be. I guess we'll see. But I think the key is that, yes, it's going to be loud, but we're really trying to keep it at standard times and pretty much always at the same time, so people know what to expect, and it's not going to be a massive surprise for people. Great. Are there questions from other members of council? Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mr. McNamara, for your presentation. It's great to see you. It's been a long time coming, and you've been certainly very loyal and dedicated to this project. So I appreciate all your work thus far. I'm sure you'd rather be out climbing with your kids. But so the price that came in, is that the price that was expected? Was it under what we thought we would get, over? How is that working within the budget itself?
Yeah, so the price was in the range we're expecting. In the 4 bids, we definitely had a few that were outside the range that we're expecting.
Scary high and scary low?
Not scary low,
Okay,
but scary high. Yes, we did have one of those. If it would have been the only bid, the project would not go ahead. Yeah. And then in terms of where it fits overall in the budget, it fits quite well in there. There's still money for contingency. We've got money for consulting, the environmental monitoring. Everything is slotted now, and I think we've got a good picture. Obviously, on a project like this, there's a good chance there's going to be some things pop up throughout construction. So that's why we still need a good amount for contingency. But at this point, we're confident, the administration is confident that the project can go ahead and will be completed, hopefully on time, but within budget.
Excellent. That was the only question I had, Mayor Barman. Thanks.
Yeah, and just on that, is there like a 10% contingency built in, or is there a percent, or how do you work the contingency?
Yeah, so we've looked at different ways. One thing we've done with our consulting firm is the way the contract is laid out is there's many different items in there, and on each item we've looked at what is our risk that we perceive, and then we've looked at what is the maximum amount that we believe we could overpay for that item, for example. So we're looking at it very granular to each different item, basically. So that's when we've done it, and then we've also looked at globally, percentage-wise. And what we've done is we've kind of looked at what we expect it to be the most realistic cost. And that includes also some numbers that are negative in there, because there's a lot of items that if we actually get some decent rock, which is what we expect, we won't need as much rock bolting, for example, and few shotcrete and some features like this. So the cost could also come down for some of the items. So Yeah, we've looked at it in many different ways, basically.
Great. So with all of the expenses to date, through the design, studies and design and all, we're confident that we'll be in below that. I can't remember what it was, $48 million budget or something that was approved years ago.
Yep. Yeah, we're definitely, yeah, I think we can say we're confident that yes, we'll be within that budget.
Great. All right. So Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mark Borman. Sorry. I actually had one question that came to mind. Based on what's happening to the east of us with flood mitigation and our neighboring municipality, do we have any concerns, knowing that it's a completely different project, any concerns on our project that may be popping up with theirs?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it definitely makes you think a little bit, right? Obviously, and we've been in touch a little bit with DMD. We don't understand either what's going on. We haven't seen any reports yet, and we're definitely interested to understand better what's happening there. But as you said, the two projects are very, very different. You know, I'm not going to talk more about what's happening there, but our project is, you know, we're confined within the walls of Cougar Creek. It's very, we're quite upstream of any residential area. You know, the one thing that we should probably expect is to see a little bit more surface flow on Cougar Creek on a more permanent basis, just because all the water has to go through that low-level outlet and then re-infiltrate after. But we're not expecting, and that's always been an expectation through the project. So, but we're not expecting, you know, any major changes past that. All the modeling has shown that, and I believe Andreas before me was discussing the, you know, the ground here is ideal for infiltration, and yeah, anyway, hopefully nothing like we've seen what will happen, but it's very different.
Yeah, it is a different project.
Yep.
I just was wondering if there was any learnings or any concerns, and it's clear that you have it in your blind sight. So
yes, no, we've definitely been discussing with a few people about it, and stayed in touch with DMD to if they do understand what's happening, so that we understand too. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks a lot, Mr. Kamir.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, yeah, thanks very much for being here, Mr. Kamir, and it's been a long time coming to get this report. I'm really, really happy that we've got to this point. It's, as we noted, it's been a long 7 years since, it's almost exactly, well, it's almost exactly 7 years from the flood, but
yep.
Also we approved the first budget for this work in July of 2013. So it's been a lot of work, long haul to get there. And you've been in for the ride the whole time. So thanks for everything you've been doing.
Yeah.
Almost okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I'm definitely looking forward to sharing a beer with a lot of people on this project.
Great. Okay. Thanks again for being here today.
Sounds good. Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to D2, the verbal update on stage 2 reopening. Ms. DeSoto.
Yes, I'm just sharing my screen here. I have a few slides to share. Oops. So thanks, Mayor Borman. As you mentioned, I'm here to provide another update to Council and the community on our reopening plans now that the province has announced further details of the stage 2 relaunch. And as you'll recall, I was before Council 2 weeks ago on June 2nd, talking about potentially what we expected to hear from the province regarding stage 2. So on June 2nd, what we expected was that stage 2 would begin no earlier than June 19th, and that it would include expansion to openings of things like additional scheduled surgeries, potential K-12 schools or summer school reopenings, libraries, personal and wellness services like massage and physiotherapy, movie theaters and theaters like Arts Place, that was expected. And we were also given a heads up that there would be some access for larger gatherings. But that was the limit of what was expected. And particularly, it was clear in their initial guidelines that rec centers, arenas, pools would remain closed until stage 3. So what was announced and learned on June 9th, so just a week ago today, was that stage 2 was actually going to be advanced up by 1 week and to begin June 12th. And in addition to all the items on the left side of that slide, stage 2 would also include permission for openings of community halls, team-based sports, outdoor recreation, fitness and sports, some outdoor gatherings of up to 100 people, which was a new number that was double the number that was previously allowed. And surprisingly, what was also included was indoor fitness centers, including pools and arenas and multi-sport complexes. So that was all relatively new to us at that last Tuesday. So we were preparing for reopening and have been preparing for reopening since we closed. And on June 2nd, what I had shared with council at the time was that we had a number of items we were working through. They're all listed on your screen there: create pedestrian-only Main Street, reopen our playgrounds, cancel our state of local emergency, and the last bullet there specifically, council directed us to open public washrooms. So those were all items that we were working on reopening by the time stage 2 launched, or hopefully by the time stage 2 launched. And I'm happy to share that, in fact, we were able to do most of that. So what is new is that we have had to adjust and advance our plans for reopening Elevation Place and Canmore Recreation Center. So as I just stated, we have been planning to reopen and what that could look like. However, we thought we had a lot more time to do that, and we didn't have the province's guidelines that outlined the parameters for which we could open. So now that we know we can open those facilities, there's a number of considerations that we need to take into account. And firstly, I want to acknowledge that we certainly know and understand that residents are eager to get back into these facilities and to enjoy them once again. And our staff are eager to get back to work. We did have to lay off a significant number of staff, and we're eager to welcome staff and residents and patrons back. However, we do want to do it in a considered and coordinated approach. So the considerations that we are working through are that we have a number of maintenance projects that are currently underway we have to complete. We also have to review and analyze the provincial guidelines that were put out. They're multi-page guidelines. They have already changed, I believe, twice since they were issued and keep getting updated regularly. There's guidelines around physical distancing requirements, monitoring within the facility. For example, we have to potentially hire additional staff to monitor change rooms, monitor fitness centers. We have to increase cleaning requirements. There will be capacity limits for facilities that we have to incorporate. And we know that there will be a COVID cost premium. All of these things, including potentially some new positions. And what we are not quite certain of yet is the ability to generate the same level of revenue that we had in the past. Of course, the other consideration is we came to council with a revised budget prior to approving mill rates. And based on the lost revenue that we were foreseeing as a result of the closure of our facilities, administration proposed $2.7 million in expenditure reductions within the budget, and council approved that. And 50% of those expenditure reductions were as a result of staff layoffs through to the end of July. So if we start bringing staff back prior to that, there are some real questions about whether we will have the budget to complete that. So we need to do that careful, complete cost benefit analysis before we understand when and how we can open our facilities. There's likely facility modifications now that we understand and have seen the guidelines that we need to implement. And some of these were being planned for already, the sneeze screens in front of customer experience counters, etc. But we now know we also have to modify office spaces and fitness spaces, and that might take a bit of construction work. And of course, the staff that we laid off need to be rehired and need to be retrained under the new COVID working environment. So with all of those considerations in mind, we have a decision-making framework that we're looking at, and we intend to proceed to open our facilities when and if we're able to meet provincial guidelines, ensure the safety of staff and patrons, which is very much about meeting the provincial guidelines, that we have the resources ready, trained, and available. So staff have been brought back. Some staff have been redeployed to other areas, so we will have to recall them from those redeployed positions. There are potentially some staff that are no longer available that have found other jobs elsewhere or left our community completely. And then we have to analyze and be assured that we can deliver the service within budget. And if we can't deliver that service within budget, we will be back before you, sharing that information with you and potentially requesting additional budget to open earlier than our budget would permit. So all of that analysis is underway. I think, as I mentioned, on June 2nd, we have a team of managers that includes our HR manager, our recreation manager, and IT manager, all working on this reopening plan with some of their team. They will be presenting their reopening plan to the senior leadership team at the town early next week, and we anticipate being able to announce reopening dates and plans next week. And if need be, if there needs additional budget or some discussion with council prior to finalizing those plans, we will either be back before you in early July asking for that or requesting a special council meeting at the end of June. So that's the status of where we're at with those large facilities. As I know there's many in our community eager to see those reopen, and we're working as quickly as we can within the information we have available and the resources we have available. So just with that, I'll take any questions you might have on any of that information.
I just want to note before there's questions, if there are any, that I'm certain while you're correct that there's many in the community that are really looking forward to having facilities reopened. I'm certain that they all want to make sure that they're reopened under safe conditions, safe for themselves and their kids and our staff. So I think people will understand the situation, and it's not a matter of unlocking a door and turning on a light switch. And it's also important to keep to note that the province basically pulled the rug out from under us with this sudden announcement of the rec centers and all being able to be open so quickly, when we had been expecting that to be stage 3. I've had the opportunity to see some of the more detailed planning, and I'm really impressed with the work that admin's been doing on getting ready for reopening whenever it should occur. So yeah, it's really comprehensive. Councillor Sanford, you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Borman. Ms. DeSoto, one of the other places that could open immediately would be the K-12 schools, correct? Under phase 2.
There are some conditions and restrictions, but yes, my understanding is that there is some ability to open, and certainly for summer schools, there is some ability to open. Actually, I believe, sorry, let me clarify that. The ability to open is for exams and testing prior to the end of June, and then for summer schools through the summer.
But most schools aren't actually opening until September. Is that? that correct?
That's my understanding.
So it's just some aspect of school is deliverable prior to September, but schools aren't actually opening until September. That's what I'm understanding.
That's my understanding as well.
Okay. Now it was announced earlier in the month that the summer fun day camps will be delivered by the town this summer. So how would we deliver those without opening the facilities?
So that's a great question. We don't intend to start those until early July. And originally, the day camps are an excellent example of how things evolved and changed throughout our planning process. So initially, the province's guidelines were clear. We would not be able to deliver day camps out of our recreation facilities. However, that changed. It actually changed just prior to the announcement about the relaunch. So we were able to drastically increase the number of youth and children that we were going to be able to support and bring in through day camps. So our intent is, while we will be using some other facilities, such as our family resource network space for the youngest children and the Scout Hall and potentially the Union Hall as well, we will also be running day camps out of our Camera Recreation Center.
Okay, that seemed like information that was slightly out of alignment, but you have other options for spaces to use for day camps then.
We have other options, and we also will be using the Camera Rec Center, and we may start the day camps prior to regular resident access to the Canmore Rec Center.
Okay, great, thank you.
We were talking earlier about the farmers market, the mountain market. Do you have an update on that?
Yes, and if Sally Cottle is available, I'm going to pass that off to her to speak to. Sally, are you there?
Might have nodded off watching us.
I am. Am I on? Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. So we have, as we've identified before, we have somebody from our FCSS team who's working on food and food security as part of the response, working with our market coordinator to try to figure out how to bring the market back. Similar to opening our facilities and summer camp, there are a number of restrictions, and those also have changed with the announcement on the 12th, but there still are restrictions. So we were initially looking at Centennial Field as a potential for a revised market, but it's my understanding that due to groundwater, the fence project in Centennial is delayed. And so the ability to host the market in Centennial while the fence construction is going on has made that site untenable. So they have another site in mind that they're doing an analysis on and working to try to bring back some type of market in a space that allows, you have to control entrances and exits and the number of people in the market. And so we're just working on an alternative location that would allow for that. So it's something that is being worked on. But like the other, every time there's an announcement and a change, it throws several things a little bit off kilter, and we have to adjust to those. So unfortunately, we don't have a date for the market, but we are working to figure out what is doable.
Presumably the mainstays in the market, people like Glenn's food truck, I'm sure they're in contact regularly with the organizers, so know what's happening.
She's pretty keen. I can tell you the market coordinator is quite keen to get up and running. I mean, it is a business venture for her as well as the vendors. There are many vendors,
yeah.
So yes.
At this time, is she, the coordinator, thinking that there'd be room for more than just food product?
Yeah, so the guidelines around the markets have also changed. So initially it was just food, but now other types of vendors are also allowable. So as they're continuing to look for a location, they're also looking at the types of vendors that we can accommodate and how many we can bring in. So I think initially the thought was it might be just food, but now with the new guidelines and a bit of a delay in our ability to get a workable site, there's possibly an opportunity to just start it with more vendors than just food. So that is also being.
Well, that's positive news then. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other discussion on that subject? Any questions for the CAO? Councillor McCallum. Boy, that high mountain air in Jasper's got you thinking, huh?
All the questions, questiony. Thanks for that. And I think what I'm hearing more in the presentation, and I don't think the public is aware, is how these guidelines are changing all the time. So it's my understanding that the new guidelines come out and there's really no red line version. It's a game of where's Waldo. So you're trying to find where the changes are from the last document. So that in itself is time consuming. My question was around something that the CAO had brought up prior with regards to the $2.7 million revenue loss that council needed to accommodate for in this year's budget, and how some of those accommodations have will be articulated, or how we will see them play out in everyday life. Clearly, basic services are being maintained and maintained well, but I was wondering if you could help us understand either today or in a future update as to what that actually is going to mean, what things we're not going to see this year as a result of the budget changes that we had to make and the rollback to 2019 tax rates that council engaged in.
Great. Timing, Therese Rogers just showing her lovely face, and she's going to be prepared to answer that question.
I'm just finalizing a detailed list that I can present to council at the July 7th meeting as an update to outline by service area what's been cut and what that impact to service levels is. So yeah, to share that shortly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
So stay tuned. Great. Are there other questions at this time? Seeing none, thanks very much for that update, Ms. DeSoto. And now we'll move on to item E1. I almost saved us an hour there. Council updates, usual format. Any questions from any councillor to any other councillor? And council updates. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. And I should have asked in the Biosphere presentation, I note that in your council update, you talk about the discussions at the Heritage Foundation with regards to board governance. And again, at the Institute, Biosphere Institute spoke of discussions around board governance as well as the name of the Institute. I was wondering if you could expand on that, please.
Mm-hmm. Well, both of those boards don't actually have very comprehensive governance policies in place. In fact, don't really have any in place. And of course, the Biosphere board has gone through some changes over the last year or two in terms of people on the board. And there's an interest from the board to better define what sort of a board they intend to be, you know, full hands-on or just advisory or whatever, and what skill sets would be best to have on the board rather than just, you know, Joe pipes up and says, oh, I'd like to be on that board. The idea is to have specific skill sets in place and try to fill the limited seats with those specific skills. In regards to the name itself, I understand from the conversations that the new director, Ms. Hodnowski, has been having that just the word institute is not well received in her circles, educated circles. It's I guess a little too grandiose for what there's a genuine interest to consider a different name that better describes or more clearly identifies what the Biosphere does. I don't know where those discussions will go. It's not, you know, top of mind or anything. The board governance is. And very similar with the Rocky Mountain Heritage Foundation. It's just a matter of the foundation's been operating under the same model and with the same people essentially for 20 years. And there's just some discussion starting about exactly the same thing. What sort of governance should be in place and what sort of makeup might the board look like. That's all that's happening right now.
Cool, thanks.
Are there other questions from members of council? Seeing none, move on to item F1, the service area report.
I think Councillor McCallum had
I was just actually, yeah, it's actually a question, just a note, and it's just the nature of the beast as to when our updates are due. So I reported on behalf of Councillor Sanford and I on that Transit Commission, but this time I made a point of, like, literally it always ends up our councillor updates are due the day before the next transit meeting. So you'll note the information that's in this is really quite out of date, and I just wanted to highlight that. But it's just the way the timing works with, yeah, so that's all.
Yeah, I mean, we all struggle with the same realities, so, but thanks for pointing that out. Okay, service area reports. Looking for any questions around the CAO's office. I have a question for the first bullet point there. Just curious, how's it going? The discussions with the MD on the rec services agreement. Is there any update you can give, or is it too soon?
we had that one meeting. Well, there's been two meetings. I met with the CAO through a Zoom meeting, and then we had both finance managers join for another meeting. Unfortunately, given the circumstances with their flood disaster that they're experiencing in Exshaw, all of the MD's efforts have been focused there. So we have been unable to meet in the last month. But Rob Ellis has assured me that as soon as they're able to get back together, they will let us know.
Great. And just, that September 30th deadline suddenly will be very, very close.
Yes.
So, yeah, it is what it is, I guess. Question under municipal services, community social development. Fourth bullet point down, it's just talking about housing and notes that funds will be used to support emergency housing needs within Canmore. And I recall Ms. Brown speaking about all of these programs and ideas when she was before council. Just trying to remember that emergency housing needs that's referenced in this bullet point. Is that short-term housing, like using hotel rooms? Is that what that's intended to provide?
Yes, and like as opposed to something like a rent supplement or helping you bridge your mortgage. Yes, right. It's meant to be emergency. Ms. Brown did tell me that they had one day last week where they had 4 cases in one day of people who were looking for emergency short-term accommodation. So our numbers are for that kind of need are certainly increasing, and that is what this program will be intended to do.
Great. Do you have any idea the sort of time scale that might be possible to assist? I mean, could through this program, could somebody see several weeks of housing assisting or?
Oh yeah, that I don't know. I certainly can follow up with you. I do know, for example, in that case where we saw 4 in one day, you may recall from previous presentations by Ms. Brown that the YWCA has set up some temporary accommodation. And I don't know what their time limits are, but it's not like it's just one night. I mean, they're meant to be trying to bridge a gap for folks. And some people who need emergency shelter choose that, and others find other alternatives. But I don't believe that is time bound. It's more about how much room they have. But I can confirm what the time frame is.
Great, thanks. I'm curious. I'm watching for hands. Councillor McCallum.
All the questions from Jasper. I just had a question. Actually, first day I wanted to say hooray for Big Summer Fun, that announcement. That is a huge relief to kids and to working parents in the Valley. And I wanted to just give a big like whoop whoop. I've talked to so many parents since that was announced that are just so relieved. What some of them need to go back to work, and this is the real stepping stone that they need to be able to get back to work. So thank you. The second thing I wanted to bring up was Canada Day events. And I've noticed there's some Facebook advertising, et cetera, that's going on. Are we going to start trying to push these out to the neighborhoods to try and get the town excited about this? I'm doing my best, word of mouth, but just wondering what kind of invigoration we can get for this new Corona model of Canada Day.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know what the communication plan is. I'm wondering if maybe Ms. Denage might know more than I do. And if she doesn't, that's fine. I can certainly follow up.
Yes, I can weigh in. We just talked about that this morning, and we are planning a couple of other initiatives with getting information out into community newsletters and reaching the some of the target audiences that way. But anything that you can do by word of mouth to help spread the word is great. We are upping our Facebook advertising, and we also have had ads in the newspaper and on our town page in the Outlook as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Denage.
I have to say, I'm really looking forward to trying out Kenny's famous barbecue sauce. Yeehaw. Huh?
I've heard it's good on tofu.
Oh yeah, well, that doesn't sound like such a good idea. Honest to God, woman. Tofu, we're talking barbecue. Watching hands for questions. Question under finance. Just a note about the assessment services branch. Doing a detailed assessment audit. Just for curiosity's sake, how often typically would a municipality like ours expect to be receiving this audit?
Our last audit was in 2007, so it has been some time. We had been in communication with our auditor last summer. And when we informed them that we were switching auditors and doing an RFP for new audit services, they actually delayed our audit from last year to this year so that they could work with our new auditor. It is a regular process, but it has been some time since we've had one.
Great. And I understand, just as you say, it's a regular process that and every municipality has assessment audit from time to time. And this is not at all related to recent assessment changes.
Not at all, no.
Right. Just want to confirm that. All the way down to public works, for me, the second bullet point around park service levels being reduced, as we know from all our budget discussions, and the note about the no flower barrels. I don't know if Councillor Mara, if there's any update from the BIA or what might happen there. No, nothing. Okay. I don't have any other questions myself. Any other member council with questions? Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I had a question, I guess it's under Public Works, regarding the Wapiti Campground. And in this report, it says the campground will be open in early June, allowing up to 50% occupancy. Has that occupancy rate been upgraded with the phase 2 announcements?
I am assuming it will be upgraded. Again, this report was written before the province changed their guidelines. So I would expect that the campground operator will be changing their guidelines to be in alignment with the province, yes.
Okay, good, thank you.
I just sighed heavily with my mic on, oops. Any other questions in regards to service area reports? So now I'll move on to item G1, the council resolution action list. Anything on that report? Seeing nothing, I believe I'll move the meeting be adjourned. Those in favor? And we're adjourned. Thank you all.
Bye.
See ya.